mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
I love to see my people party with me, man. Good to see you, Black Brown.
Yes, come on in. Welcome, 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 welcome.
Hey, happy birthday, Miss J. Hey, Rhea, Sweet Sharita. Party with me all night long. Say what? That's right, baby. Bring it to the front. Hey, Janine. Well, guess what?
Welcome.
Hey Jay, hey Randy.
Salute. Bronx in the building.
Guess what? When I see you, yeah. Hey Cole, I get a little happy when I see you. What?
Morning. Peace. Welcome.
See you, Listen, fellas, I put your picture on my mirror. Start to blush when somebody says your name. And my stomach is a pain. See you walk in my direction, I go the other way. I start to stutter when I speak. Try to stand, but my knees go weak. What's happening to me? Anybody, can you tell me what it means? I lay my head on my pillow. He got me staring out the window. Wish on a star for a sign. That's the reason.
Welcome everybody. Everybody's doing it. This is the time to do it.
Hey fellas, listen. I scribble X and O's on my notebook, checking how my hair and my nails look. I feel myself up in the zone. I get nervous when you call. Say I'm not home. See your face. I hear my
A lot of shows happening. Junkyard, Backyard, Rare Essence.
I wonder if you know, or do you have a clue? Yeah.
Push Play, Belladonna. Oh, assalamu alaikum wa alaikum salam. What's up? I will.
So sexy boy.
You will love it. The wickedest band alive.
Well, guess what? When I see you, Hey, sweet Sanita. Hey, getting happy when you party with
Northeast Groovers.
Hey, Janine. When I see you, I get a little happy. Hey, Tony. I get a little happy when you party with me. Hey, Tim. When I see you, I get a little happy. Hey, Marlon. I get a little happy when you party with me. Hey, Jay. When I
I like, what I like, what I like.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Good to see you. Good to see you. Those who will be here later, welcome to you as well. Let's see. So real quick, before I move on, I just want to shout out Fonz Productions. I don't pretend to know anybody over there, but a lot of great go-go content. He or they or their crew, or I don't know exactly how they're doing it, but they're at a lot of shows. So a lot of folks, Junkyard just did a show recently, Major League Band. They're not old school per se. Although I'm not always sure who's in what band. So like, D Floyd, who was with the legendary Rare Essence, now does Push Play with Go-Go Mickey. And then Rare Essence is reconfigured with old and new members. But my point is, there's a lot of shows happening. And one suggestion is I just been advocating is that people go to Eventbrite and put go, and you'll see shows, a lot of stuff. So, and then there's nothing like it to me. I mean, there's literally nowhere I would rather be other than some specialized configured show of some form, but now that all my bucket lists are passing away, I mean, it's the best thing going. It's just so dope. So and everybody in there now is, like I'm the young man in there, in some of these spots at almost 55. Some of these, okay. So we're going to do a number of things this morning. So welcome everybody. And real quick, again, tomorrow, Saturdays with Renee, Greg Levy is joining us to talk about socialism and electoral politics and his campaign for Senate in Ohio. And so that's on Black Liberation Media. And then on African World Order on Sunday, check out Earn Your Liberation. We're going to have another fun Sunday afternoon. And then I've been sort of, I don't know how they say it these days, biding my time, trying to be as patient as possible. But finally, on Monday of next week, Daniel Taluk is going to join me for a real discussion about the World Cup. So come on back for that as well. I haven't been watching it. Yesterday was the first game I watched. I did watch France-Morocco. But I haven't been watching a lot of the games, but I've been watching a lot of the coverage, the discussion, the politics. There is so much nonsense going on. Argentina, the only team without a black player in it, is getting a lot of funky calls in their favor. There was an Argentinian referee yesterday that got kind of funky with France. Trying to ice Mbappe, had him standing on the penalty spot for 3 minutes. But I have to say this, and the contradiction is crazy. France is the most African team left, only 2 European starters, and I think that they are affirmative action hires. They're definitely, Rabiot and Digne are definitely not the centerpieces of that team. And they might be the nicest team. I don't want to get recency bias, but they might be as nice a team as ever. We'll see if they live up to it. But that squad is crazy. You have just think about it. The Ballon d'Or winner, the player who got the best player in the world award last year, is their second best player. Dembele ain't even the best player, and he's the best player in the world. So I don't know. I'm trying, you know, I'm not proud of myself for watching, but the team is crazy. The team is crazy good. And I don't know. And even when Mbappe missed the penalty, I was like, it really, I mean, that was a little bit like, I don't want them to miss all their chances and give away a fluke. But I really was like, it's inevitable that they're going to score. And it should have been really 4 or 5-0. But yeah, there's some great stories in there. Cabo Verde, their run, you know, like the Iranian story. I mean, there's a lot Daniel and I are going to get into, and he's the expert. So I've been waiting. Just one thing I will just slightly tease that I definitely want to have some more fun with is that I have watched, my YouTube algorithm is now destroyed because I have spent the last couple of days watching all of the USA crash out videos after they lost. So I didn't see the game. Maybe a couple pieces here and there. I think I was a little bit we were watching maybe for a few minutes, but just because of just once I saw that they were losing, we started to tune in to look a little bit, just to see the tears and when they cut to the crowd and just the American and then all of the media coverage crashing out. It's been delightful. So and the way it happened with the red card, the birthright citizenship. It's a lot of stuff in there. And then blaming the African. Trump. I mean, it's some wild. So we're gonna have a lot of fun on Monday. So check that out. All right. Okay, so at 11 o'clock, Mtume is going to join me. I invited him and Jared to come back. Jared has some family stuff, and this wasn't really well planned out, so maybe we can have more discussions. But I have so many links already in the show description, so I think I finally have lived up to the promise. But one of those links is the recent show from the other day on Wednesday with Imperial 80s, where Jared Ware, myself, and Mtume talked about the film Glory. It was a whole lot of fun. But baked within that was this essay that AdolphReed had written in 2018 praising the film. And we didn't really get into the essay the way I wanted to. So I wanted to get back to that today. So Mtume is going to join me at 11 to talk about that. So, and then whatever I don't finish from before that, I will finish after that discussion. But so yeah. And thank you. It was a lot of fun. But this essay that AdolphReed wrote is bananas, and I don't want to miss the opportunity to have a proper discussion of it. So please check out the link to that essay's in the show description as well. All right. Okay. So the thumbnail, had a little bit of fun with it. One of my daughters was cracking up when she saw it, and this reference to myself as Halsey, and I want to immediately explain where I'm getting this from, and the link to this full video essays in the show description. But I want to say just very quickly, like, one of the things I wouldn't say done deep dive studies into, but have sort of read some of the literature over the years, but not really made it a focus by design. And I will admit it's been by design, is the issue of biraciality within Black struggle and Black life. I have, and perhaps folks would, care to there is some, I'm sure, psychoanalysis to arrive at that, but through my own personal experience and my own political interests, I've not wanted that to be the focus of my own work, and not wanted to be the focus of how I show up in political or academic spaces. So it's not to be in some sort of denial. It's just not the forward facing approach that I've experienced or wanted to convey. So I'm not saying it's 100% right or whatever, but I've for the most part rejected what I've understood to be a politicized attempt to weaken Black unity, Black community, and to create a certain form of liberal politics around biraciality, multiraciality, and without having the proper language for it and not really study. I've as I will today, stumbled through this and not really. But as the world changes and as more media and as my phenotype has changed and my interaction with the world has changed, I have started to revisit some of it just to see what people are saying and whatever. But just to be clear, so my mother is a European descended Jew. My father, an African descended Black man who briefly were married, had me, and then I was primarily raised by my mother. And the line I've come to adopt that I think I wish I would have come to a long time ago that best explains my own experience is, in an oversimplified way, is I was raised by a Jew, but not as a Jew. So I don't have any beyond some, my mother is proud to be a Jew and that, but she's almost a hostile atheist. I was about to say atheist. She is a hostile atheist, labor, communist, not maybe revolutionary, but definitely not liberal. So, and when we read it as a family, sort of one of the last sort of fully present intellectual acts my mother was able to participate in before this dementia shit took over. And that disease is, I know this administration is attacking science, but it's, that thing needs to be up there with the cancers and the other things that they're trying to fix, because it's a vicious, and we have the more benign version. Like, I know there are many worse versions, but it's just so disruptive. Let me I don't know what's happening with the devices here, but all right. So I just want to be clear I'm seeing a comment. I don't know if I want to, I just want to make sure Huge Vibes is I don't want to, let's not mistake me talking a little bit about my parents for an invitation for your commentary. So I just want to make sure I'm not misreading something before I start jumping fully in the chat. But so I want to be clear about that. This is not inviting. This is just trying to situate myself for this discussion. All right. So, but so that anyway, and raised with not a denial of, there was always a little bit of attention, and this is one of the things that came up in the rise of critical mixed race studies, where this movement in the 80s, as I understand it, beginning in the 80s, of white women with Black children or biracial children wanted to push the biracial identity, so that they felt less disconnected from their own children, as I understood the argument from years ago when I read some of this literature, it was that Jared Sexton's work in particular, but it was with this idea that I just lost my train of thought, but that white women would want to work to redefine the context of that they didn't feel like they were being excluded, and that they did not feel like they had to sort of give their children fully to the Black community. But because of the way I looked, a little browner, the full head of hair, et cetera, so forth, and the times in the 70s and the 80s where these categories were not fully fleshed out, and in the area here in the East Coast, it was very much the way I was raised. You were either white or Black, and you know, like, and then the smatterings of other groups. But so it was very much an invitation to be Black once outside the house, and then more nuanced discussions inside the house, but always with the encouragement that I be a critical thinker and become ever you know, pointed towards some sort of radical conclusions. So anyway, I just never, like I said, I just, you know, so but as things change and, you know, things come up in the classroom a lot, you know, the you know, I've tried to keep up with some of the discussion and the pop culture, whatever, and maybe intervene here or there. So a few weeks ago, this video came across my feed, and maybe somebody recommended it to me, but I feel like it came up just sort of in the whatchamacallit. And you'll see that I've referenced this content creator more recently in terms of buying power in Hollywood. But I thought they did this really well done video essay. I'm only going to play this very short clip just to situate the joke of the thumbnail, and invite people to check it out on their own if they haven't already. I don't necessarily agree with all of the political conclusions, but in terms of a video essay that I think with an appropriate care addresses this issue of multiraciality, biraciality within the Black world, I think it's pretty well done, and it points to some literature, and as a video essay, it's very well done. So I'll invite folks to check that out. The Tragic Mulatto, An American Lie, and I'll come back to talk a little bit more about that point too. Princess Weeks, is that how you pronounce her name? I believe, but let's just check this out here.
This is when the tragic mulatto transforms from a figure of antebellum tragedy to a modern-day threat under passing. Passing is another one of those terms that has been co-opted. There is a difference between someone who can pass and someone who is passing. For example, Halsey. Halsey has a white mother and a Black father. Yes, I found the picture. He is a Black man. She is biracial, but because of her phenotype, she could pass for white. However, Halsey has never denied her heritage. She presents as white. That's a difference. And we know that biracial people look very different. Naya Rivera, rest in peace, was Afro-Latina. She looked like this. Her brother looks like this. Genetics are weird. And also we can understand it.
All right. So that was it. And that's where I got the joke when I was watching the essay. I was like, so I'm basically Halsey now, is my point. That is someone who is increasingly, at least, said to be presenting as someone who could pass for white, but who aggressively was the word I was looking for, but who happily accepts and acknowledges their Black heritage and does not attempt to pass. And then she gets into some of the history of passing and that distinction, those who could pass if they wanted to, and those who do pass because they want to or felt that they needed to. But as I was saying, for the most part of my life, for the first probably 20 years or so, let's say the first 20 or plus years, I do slightly remember like just as I was getting out of the Navy, there started to be some I don't know, increased questions about who I was. But for the most part, my whole life, if I said that I had a white mother, that presented more of a shock to people than is today, where I have to say that I do have a Black father. Oh, and the point I forgot with the whole dementia thing, the last act that sort of intellectual, fully present act that my mother that was the point I forgot to finish situating, that that the autobiography of Hetty Jones, the first wife of Amiri Baraka, we read that book, and there was a lot of overlap with her life and my mother's, some literal in terms of places and people. But the key difference was that Hetty had a much more affluent middle class upbringing, whereas my mother had a much more working class background. And not sure what OBS is struggling with here today. Not really sure what's going on with OBS. Seems to be some hesitance. So I've sometimes joked with people that if you want, I wonder if it's struggling with the background today. Anyway, while I work on this real quick and check this out, please do like, share, subscribe, support the platform, put this in the you know, do all the things. You know what I'm asking. You know what the request is. Let's see if that helps with the lag. And we'll just leave it there. There are no tabs open. I know the basics, old grease. I'm not that unprofessional. I know the basics. Dr. Ball, your hair didn't grow. Oh no, I used to have that's what I'm saying. And even that's why I've even, you know, sort of if you look at the what is it, the thumb, I don't know, the thumbnail of my YouTube channel, that's me, man. I used to have a full beautiful head of hair. The pencil stayed in it. Okay, so just a few more points on this real quick. Now, what I really did appreciate about this video essay is that and this is one of the points that I would want to further politicize, is that kind of like when a little while ago I looked into Cedric Robinson's work on film and the mulatto in film, and while that's not raised in this Princess video essay, from pointing to different work and different scholarship, she makes a similar point that I'm taking from it, that the concept of the tragic mulatto or mulatto, this person constantly trapped between two worlds, was all created as a narrative device by whites to define whiteness as, in this country, in the US, as exclusively without black blood, extending the one drop rule, as she reminds in the video, back, I can't even remember, like 1/16, I think they said. If you had 1/16 black blood, you were black. And so it had less to do even with phenotype and anything else. It had everything to do with trying to cordon off an exclusivity around whiteness. And the point that she doesn't make overtly in that video that I think is important to remind is that this is a part of the geographic differences of settler colonialism. And again, the basics that in the Caribbean and Central and South America, white men went and conquered. So their whiteness had to travel with them through their lineage, making the one drop rule in much of those regions of the world the exact opposite as it played out here, where one drop in Latin America made you white, whereas one drop of blackness in the United States makes you black. And that's, of course, because the whites that came here came as full families and settled and didn't have that same need to expand themselves through patriarchal seed spreading. But I just think it's important that just to point out again that it is a media product that promotes all of these social categories, but then promotes the one drop rule to cordon off whiteness, and then also to promote this idea of the tragic mulatto constantly being, because of course they would want to define those that they are helping to create through sexual violence or otherwise. They would want to define them as not white and not fully encouraging a solidarity with Black. So this tragicness is now, one of the points that I did want to raise from that video is that eventually she goes into a portion where she references the film Sinners and the way biraciality plays out through the biracial woman character in that film. And that is Princess, the host, makes this reference to she says very quickly in passing, pun intended, "Don't put that on me," was the line. And I noted it here, and I didn't timestamp it because I knew I wasn't going to play too much of the video, but it's when she's talking about Stansfield, right, is the woman's name, right? Something like that. There's a point where Princess, the host of the video, is saying something like, making reference to someone's place, whether they're defined as Black, whether they're biracial, whether they self-define as Black, and she's not wanting to impose her own thoughts on that person, and she just sort of says, you know, so don't put that on me. And the reason I'm making the note, and again, I'm sorry, I don't see what is causing this particular lag that I keep seeing. Now I'm really confused, and I'm back to just blaming StreamYard. But so in my note here, I said that this is evidence of the point that these forms of representation, that is in this case mixed race, the mixed race woman and Sinners, do nothing to advance our understanding. And in part it was because Princess was pointing to a lot of the drama that this kicked up in the public sphere around biraciality, passing, and that the film in Sinners doesn't allow for a full-on investigation and does a lot to return, I'm going to come back to this point in another context in a minute, return the discussion of biraciality to a sort of standard cliche of because there's that point that is raised where the character, she said that she was told to go off and marry and pass as a white woman so that she wouldn't have the relationship with Smoke or Stack or one of them. But she wanted that. And she says in the film, I wanted to be Black. I wanted to be with my Black family and my Black community, but you sent me away. And like many things in the film, this is just not dealt with. It's not dealt with in any way that adds substance to an understanding of the historical context of biraciality. So I only wanted to make the point that, like, again, that while many of us want to see ourselves and see ourselves represented, we often, that representation in the context of how media function in this society is not going to be of much value, and it's going to be used to perform, in this case, the tragic mulatto trope, which is a construct of white narrative creation to cordon off the really only the category of whiteness and saying the rest of you can figure this all out as long as you understand that in this country, none of you are white and none of you are fully human and none of you will be fully recognized, you know, before we even get into any issue of class within a white society, none of you are going to be recognized as being of any value or worthy of fully participating and contributing. So for me, and this is, again, I just admit that I've again, because of my own personal anecdotal experience, but then also the way I've wanted to engage the world, I've not made this perhaps enough of a focus. In part because I kind of like right now, I've not still fully found a way to convey what I really want to convey, which is ultimately that I'm happy to have anyone want to identify in any way that they would like to, in any way that they feel comfortable. I want us all ultimately, though, to recognize the politicization of those choices and the categories, and to recognize the way race is politicized in the society to aid the imperial project and the white supremacist project. And I've always, I wrote a piece that we've talked about a little bit, I think, with Renee, this invitation to whiteness that I've always rejected. And so while that was the other point I meant to make. So while I would not always argue that I or those of us who are mixed are always fully 100% accepted with open arms and love into the Black community, my point was always, I ultimately do not care. Let me not say that's not true. I care less about how the Black community welcomes me or us, and more about how we are not allowed to aid in the oppression of Black people by a white supremacist society. So in other words, as I sometimes have conceived it, and this has even been asked, so like when the Black Revolution happens and the doors and the gates around the Black nation close, where would I end up and where would my mother end up? And the way I've always conceived it was, if the Black community closed the gates on us, then we would just sit outside those gates and make do. In other words, the point would never to be to try to find some value in a white society. And I like the point just always be, I would rather be off by myself. That whatever hostilities come from the African world, it's just never matches the hostilities that come from the European and white world. Now that's just an anecdotal whatever, and I know there's a lot of disagreement and difference of opinion in response to that, but that's just but my point ultimately being, I don't like the way popular culture politicizes anything, and in this case, this issue as well. I don't like the way so that was one of the points I was going to make in terms of how I situate myself, that as I said, my mother, I was raised by a Jew, but not as a Jew. And I was raised primarily in a working class Black part of an affluent suburb, suburban Section 8 housing. So I didn't have I'd never had the Jewish or white socialization, but I also in many ways didn't have the standard Black one either. So, and maybe that's why I've been happy to reach the conclusions that I would reach. I would rather stay in some liminal state than try to side up with the whites. Like that would, so this invitation to whiteness could never be accepted, regardless of the shifts in my own phenotype or whatever else. The being, and in part being around whites, being around in predominantly white settings, even for a few years in high school, made clear that even at the more liberal, affluent wing, it was like the subtle, the microaggressions, even, never mind the overt macro ones. I was just like, no, I'm good. I'm going to try to find my Black community elsewhere. And again, as I've often said, one of the only other Black male in my 8th and 9th grade class at Baltimore Friends, at least the only one I remember, was also named Jared. Same spelling and everything. And we didn't run exactly in the same circles. He was much cooler than I was. And he was like, he had already had his crew. He like came up in that space, and I was like dropped in briefly. But I remember he reached out a couple years ago, many years after this high school experience, and he said that, like, both of us, we went looking for our Black experience, though he was fully Black. But he made the point, he was like, I went to Howard University, and was like, I needed to get out of that white environment. And I always thought he had this great experience. I thought he was the cool kid, everybody loved him, but as makes sense, the microaggressions. So anyway, all right. So that's why, again, as I've had several other critiques, some of them are all linked in the show description, about Sinners, this presentation of biraciality didn't do much. And then it led to a lot of, that was what she was talking about, it led to all of these discussions of was she, some, what, like an undercover vampire or something. She was like the untrustworthy biracial who lets the whiteness in, or something like that, and it sparked all this stuff in the but again, I just want to shout her out. That video, again, linked in the show description, from Princess Weeks, again, I think I'm pronouncing her name correctly, is very well done, and adds a lot of substance to the history of these categories, to the history of biraciality as a category and a concept in this country, and some of the political, economic, and racial reasons for that. But the point I just want to highlight and emphasize for today and for this moment is that largely the biracial category politically, and the tragic mulatto narrative, has been one imposed on us by a white world wanting to cordon off itself as white, exclusively white. And I mean that to say, like many other aspects of the diaspora's and everyone else's identity, these identities are imposed on us and require some deconstruction and redefinition of self-concept, all towards the most politically radical end. And that's a point I'm going to come back to in just a moment. But I want to stick with Sinners for a second, because in a different context slightly than biraciality, there's a point made even in praising the film that actually makes my point. So admittedly, I started a little bit comically with the whole point with the thumbnail and the joke and me being Halsey, but the whole point about being an increasingly, it's painful even to say, white passing biracial who happily identifies with his Blackness. All right. I do also think, again, my situation is fascinatingly unique. I think if you look at the specifics of my family and their politics and the overlaps. And I often would make jokes, because even though we didn't grow up together, I would always see, we briefly lived together when I was first born. And then you see I would always grow up with these pictures, and then eventual, connection. But, this idea of having a Jewish mother and then prominent siblings who are prominent members of the Nation of Islam was always funny to me. It was just like, and I know Jamil may still be in the chat, but it was just always funny to me. And even when we weren't all in the same space, it did give me a sort of politicized and racialized grounding, because it was like, even when I would go out in the world and you would hear people say something negative about Farrakhan or the Nation of Islam, it would be like, or just even the concepts of Black nationalism. And I'd be like, well, how bad could it be? My brother and sister in there. Like, it would be just that simple. Like how bad could it be? And then as I obviously came to learn more about it through hip hop as well, All right, so I'm watching this other channel, and Native Media Theory, and the link is in the show description. a delayed thought on Sinner's rant from just a day ago. But check out just this portion here where he's talking about, because if you remember in Sinners, there's a brief part at the beginning that I had forgotten about, where, as he describes, much like as a cliche or a trope in film, the native peoples are brought in to sort of give some sort of narrative explanation to the mysticism of the air. Like, they're not the focus of the story, but they're just there to sort of situate the mysticism. And he's talking about how Kugler did that again, using some Choctaw and other groups to do it. And this is, but just listen to what he says here.
You know, it was really nice to see Nathaniel Archon as the lead hunter. He was actually more recently in Train Dreams as well with Joel Edgerton. I actually have some small thoughts on that too, but that, I think maybe that'll be more a shorter video. It was just really cool to see all that. And of course, in the credits, it was really cool to see how many consultants this film had, including Choctaw. It was very meticulous. It was very in depth, I could tell, and it was very quick, but obviously, you know, they were kind of in and out. They kind of, I don't want to say that they fulfilled a trope, that they fulfilled it's a bit of a meme. I mean a meme in like the actual mimetic sense. Stereotypes are a type of meme of the fact that like natives, they come in, give exposition. Sometimes they know of the dangers of the horrors that be, and then they tell the white people, and then they're like, well, like, that's it. We tried to warn you. There's a lot of cases in horror films where that's the case, and Kugler kind of leaned on that a little bit, but while giving them just a bit more character and nuance, and making them interesting, you know, just for that literal, just like, I think it's like two minutes on screen that they're on there. It just got me thinking a bit more about like how, especially in genre films and in horror, I want to see more of that with native characters. Obviously, as you'll see within the next few weeks, I'm trying to change that myself.
All right, so check out his channel for more on what he's about to be doing. But this is where we would disagree. This is my point. So he goes on to praise further the film Sinners, and even says at one point, thanks, Mr. Kugler. Says Mr. Kugler for the inclusion and the representation. And I'm saying that's the slickness of it. And I see Samantha's in the chat, so I'm sure it could be said better, but this is the point. That what I was arguing with the Vernon philosophy, and just in general with my arguments around the purpose of media in a colony or in a colonial setting, that the representation is a false inclusion meant to set a tone, meant to set to pacify and mollify, while doing, as he just said, the same thing. He just said this is a trope. It's a cliche. This happens all the time. They do this all the time. But because Kugler took a few more minutes to add some flourish and took some time to study, apparently with some native experts, and he, you know, and because he might have included an actual Choctaw actor, that this is somehow an advance. And what I would argue, I'm saying, no, this is a sophistication of it. If once upon a time, having white actors darken themselves and portray the savage Indian was an obvious, overt, criticizable, dismissible. But to then do the same exact thing using authentic actors and clothing and language and aesthetics, but doing the same thing, just makes it a more sophisticated form of the counterinsurgency. They've just elevated the game, and our analysis is not keeping up. It also was a little bit troublesome to hear that he would say that you know, he wants more, you know, it's like just have Hollywood allow more Native people to make horror films that Hollywood wants. Like this is not the solution. This is why we keep, and I really do want us to get back to this film festival idea. We need to be, and I just figured out my film. I've been struggling, by the way. I just figured out the film what I want to do for my submission. So yeah, as it relates to Sinners, I just wanted to point that out. And I do want to come back briefly, have a few minutes before Mtume gets here to this biraciality piece, and then I'll check the comments. We can come back to that. But there was this essay from years ago. It's the citation is linked in the show description. I'm not going to can't make it available to you, but it's from I think 2007 in the Black Scholar from Raylena Joseph, and it's called "Performing the 21st Century Tragic Mulatto: Black, White, and Jewish Autobiography of a Shifting Self" by Rebecca Walker, who was the daughter of Alice Walker. I read this years ago, and I thought it was brilliant. And this is where I eventually reached out to Dr. Joseph, and we've had a series of conversations around her work. And to be fair, she has not wanted to maintain a focus on this particular article, but I happen to think it's brilliant, and wanted to just quickly reference it here because it helps, I think, explain at least why I've approached this topic the way I have and have wanted to engage, even for a time where, and again, it's never been to deny myself. In fact, I remember talking to Dr. James Turner, and I've shared this before, the late great founding director of the Africana Studies and Research Center. And he was telling the story of a Black woman that used to meet with other Black women every year for these Black women retreat groups for Black women. And after years of meeting, it was discovered that this woman had a white husband, and it destroyed the chemistry of the group. Over years, I've come to think I might know who he was talking about. He never told me, but the point was, and this is in the point of the story, and where I took it was, and I was talking with him about it in the context of Black political organization. It was, do I make sure to announce myself as biracial, just in case anyone was unclear when I enter these groups? And his feeling was that you should, just so everybody's clear. So I would always do it, just in case anybody, when I would first meet people or join an organization, I would just take a moment just to say, I am of this particular mixture and background, but just so, and if anybody has any issues, just so we're clear. There were never any that were expressed to me directly, although I do think, and this is something for another discussion other time, I do think over time that it was more of an issue than I realized or would want to acknowledge. And I think in some ways I've even played myself, as they used to say, in some of these situations. But that was my approach, at least, to say. And then I would also say, I would not identify, and I would have even been on panels where someone next to me would say, they would say, I'm so and so, and I'm a biracial, blah blah blah, multiracial, and I would always say, my name is Jared Ball. I am a Black man with a white mother, and it wasn't to deny my mixture. It wasn't to deny any of my parentage. It was to point out the fact that I'm rejecting this category of biracial because I think it's a political attempt to disunify Black people and to weaken Black radical politics. Because my point was always, and is still, I don't care. At the end of the day, I care less about me and how I'm identified, or how I project, or how other people perceive me, or how my definition to others in the world changes and has changed over time. I'm more interested in clarity internally with myself, which I think I've attained. But I'm more interested in any of that in, again, the politicization of it all, the weaponization of it. And I've never wanted to, and my point being, and I'm going to probably come back to this another time as well, whatever identity people want to assume, racial, sexual, gendered, political, whatever, that they should find the most radical traditions that do exist in all of these not so-called, but all of these identifications, and not let that identification be the end point. Again, to paraphrase Jamil Al-Amin, to be black is beautiful, black is beautiful, but it's insufficient. So to be whatever is wonderful, but it's insufficient. And I've always felt that the attempt to impose a biracial category and identity on Black America in the context of the United States has been done to create disunity and to weaken the potential for Black radical politics among a racialized community that is often put in association with each other. So that's and is biologically and often socially in association with each other. So just very quickly, there's a couple lines in here I just want to, or really just one. Maybe not just one. So this book came out in when did that book come out? 2000. Black, White, and Jewish Autobiography of a Shifting Self. And I remember I read the book because that was in many ways me, Black, White, and Jewish. And I didn't like the book. And I didn't know why I didn't like the book, except other than this vague feeling of you're attempting to play this category, to be this category, and to walk yourself away from Black radical politics. And again, I'm happy to have everybody investigate their own backgrounds and do their own thing, but I don't want it to lead to a walking away from Black radical or any sort of radical politics. So I was very much, I don't like the book. So when I read this article, I was like, this article is bar after bar after bar. Very well written and explains the point that I'm trying to get at. And this is one of the lines here. Mixed race memoirs are a recent phenomena produced for and by the loving generation, the population of multiracial people born after the 1967 Supreme Court decision legalizing interracial marriage. And there were a boom of these books, including Barack Obama's Dreams of My Father, which if you go back and read, even if he's claiming then to have had no presidential aspirations, is clearly written as a post-loving generation multiracial memoir for someone who wants to be president and the first Black president. And I'm saying all those words intentionally. So, and I've paraphrased this line here from Homi Bhabha. Hybridity is not a third term that resolves the tension between two cultures, but it is instead a peculiar replication which terrorizes authority with the ruse of recognition, its mimicry, its mockery. I oversimplified that over the years to simply say, stop telling me that my presence, as was attempted to be the case among liberals, is satisfying some tension. And when people would ask, well, why do you have the certain politics, or why do you accept an identity as you have, Jared? I'm saying whatever people may think about me or mixed race people, I'm saying I recognize that my presence solves and resolves no tension between two groups. So don't let my presence act like there's no anti-Black this, white supremacist that, colonization this, intercolonialism that. And then she goes on and raises this point, because this is Rebecca Grant Leventhal. Leventhal was her born name. She took the name Rebecca Walker, because that's the other thing. If you ever read the book, Rebecca Walker, the book is she never uses, it's brought up here by Joseph, she never uses womanism, the phrase coined by her mother, but she's critical of her mother throughout the whole book, and in many ways, as I remember, it blames her mother more than her father for all of her troubles, but then accepts the name, but adopts the name Walker because ain't no money in Leventhal. Ain't no money in popularity in being Rebecca Leventhal. The daughter of who? And that was my point. I saw those memoirs coming up when I was a younger man. And I was like, what is all this stuff? What are you all trying to say? And I think Joseph captures it there. And this has been my approach and why I appreciate the reference to Halsey, who I don't know anything about. I don't know anything other. This is the most I know about her. I've never listened to a second of her music, or I don't know anything about her. But if she's being, all right. Mtume's here. I'm gonna at least pause for this for now. I'm even going to change the background as we talk about the concept of the white savior. And invite people to again check the link in the show description for the Millennials Are Killing Capitalism episode that we did about the film Glory, and then to also find the essay linked in the show description that we're going to talk about here in just a second from AdolphReed. Mtume, good to see you again. Welcome back. Peace.
Was good. I'm cracking up at this photo because I literally, when this episode happened on Game of Thrones, I literally got into an argument with someone that I know, a Libyan cat who was into fantasy. He was into you Americans are obsessed with race. And I remember I was like, why have all these dark-skinned people suddenly in Game of Thrones lifted up the white chick? He's like, oh, don't bring your race analysis to fantasy. I remember was literally his quote. And I couldn't take it. Yeah, it was wild.
See, I'm bad with that. I've ruined friendships over shit like that. Like we can't hang out no more.
Him and I don't have a friendship at all. I mean, I didn't really want one after them politics got exposed, but
that's what I'm saying. It's to me, that's right up there with you're thinking too much. Just the general, you're overthinking it. Like,
yes.
Once you don't tell me I'm overthinking it because you underthinking it.
Why are you?
And then definitely don't tell me not to bring
this.
Race. Yeah, don't
into fantasy. I was like, what?
First of all, I'm not proud of this, but I watched Game of Thrones when it was coming out. I watched it. I saw this scene as it was happening, airing, live, and was like, oh shit.
Because if you remember, or the chat, wasn't this also the narrative where they had the black dude who was kind of like, he was like a jeweler or like a merchant. Remember they had it was like a black man, and he was like do you remember this? It was like because she's in this nation or like that wouldn't be nations. It would be this sector of whatever they lived in. And I remember the guy that was trying to get next to her. He was a brother, right? Do you remember that?
No, I only remember Drago or whatever, the Jason Momoa's character.
Yeah, it was after that. Once he's dead and she's out. I think it's either before this or it's right after. Yes, Leah's confirming. Yes, and black guy. Yeah, they had it.
I'm sure it's my memory.
He's manipulating, and he ended up being like a manipulator.
Dark skin, larger black dude, British accent. I just don't remember this at all.
I was like, they're just doing the most. Because I was just like, look, man.
Oh, he wanted to marry her.
Yes, because he wanted her fortune. And he was trying to, the whole thing of the woman who gets the fortune, she's left to her own devices when she loses her husband. It's all bullshit, feudal stories. So all the men try to, not bullshit, but I'm sure it did happen in feudal times, but the way they kind of manipulate it.
No, we're not talking Game of Thrones. We're talking about this in the context of the white savior that we all saw, and I think most thinking people saw as Glory, as participating in the film Glory. And folks, we're not replicating any of that discussion here. Please go watch that extensive, very fun salute to you and Jared discussion. I had a really good time. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of if we want to get back to the Reed piece, because I read it again.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring that up here because this was because you sent me this, and I couldn't, I don't agree with Reed on a lot of things, but I couldn't believe this when you sent the quote.
Well, this was the thing that put me over the top. with Reed, in meaning that I had already had my issues, but I had never been someone who really deeply engaged in a lot of his work. I did read what is it? What are the drums are playing? Is it playing Booker or saying
what are the right? His criticism of Dyson and all of them, which I really appreciated.
Which and I really appreciated it. And I remember as I tried to engage in more things, I began to have troubles. And then I think I said I did say this on our stream. Some of the people that were his, heirs or students or the people that he was bringing out, I had a lot of trouble with their politics, and I would see this consistent attempt when I was making an argument about, Black Revolution, Blackness, anything. They would send me an AdolphReed article to as a kind of like ninja star, like swat, we got you, but AdolphReed don't agree with you, or and I'm like, okay, what does that mean? All Black people have to agree? And this is kind of where this came out, and I don't remember the specifics of why I was sent this in an argument. It might have been with Free State of Jones, which he does talk about briefly in it. Because I saw that movie and I was not into it on any level.
I still haven't seen it. I had it like it's on a list, but I could once I saw the the trailer, and I know he's meant to be taken seriously now, but I just can't take Matthew McConaughey seriously. I just have to admit that bias too. So once I saw him and they were had him central in the thing, I was like, nah, man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the problem with the film, and it's similar to Glory, is that it has a particular kind of politics that it wants you to believe in an alternative history of the American project. But I keep saying that the American project that we should buy into. The issue is not the project in itself. It's in that there's parts of the project that we didn't follow or that we can follow later on. And this is where the arguments would come into with certain people. And this is a lot of people in the Jacobin crowd, right? It's really there. And even a little later with some people that I'm actually really quite shocked, but I can't be shocked that Reed allows them to say that he's our teacher. People I don't know, people have heard of the Platypus Affiliated Society. You've ever heard of them? Yeah.
Well, through you, yeah.
Chris Catrone, right? I mean, I had Chris Catrone, and I'm gonna say it because he did it publicly. He literally called Gerald Horne. They should Gerald Horne a slur through saying AdolphReed said this to him in private.
Wow, a slur?
Yeah.
AdolphReed called Gerald Horne allegedly.
Yeah, and you can find it.
That's
allegedly.
Crazy.
And I said
reported this publicly. He shared this publicly
in a chat in a YouTube chat. And I said to him, I said, if you want to call Gerald Horne, say that with all your chest. Don't use AdolphReed, a claim that AdolphReed said that to you in private as a way to get away saying that type of shit.
It just doesn't make any sense, though. I don't know who Chris Catrone is, but
you shouldn't want to. You don't need to know.
Okay.
I feel bad. I'm sorry, chat, and I'm sorry everybody for bringing him in here. We'll leave his name as quickly as he was brought into here. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
First of all, that kind of. Yeah. I just don't. That's where I get my what do they call it? Respectability politics. That's one area of version of criticism I don't like to get into publicly. I'll be petty and be whatever, but house Negro and all of that kind of, and Coon and all of that and Uncle Tom and all of that. I'm I'm very hesitant.
I did it years ago, but I realized I think it was probably when I read some of the stuff about Ali and Frazier.
Yeah, that'll do it.
That made me reconsider that engagement. You
Maybe
know,
that's
when I
what
like,
did it to me. Yeah.
yeah, because I was like, oh man, there
Yeah.
could be a 2D chess.
There's a lot
That's-
going on here, man. And you can't, I don't like that. I don't like that. So he should have just said, look, this is what Horn said or did, and I disagree with it. Like, leave it there. What is all this? Like, I don't, but whatever. All right. Yeah.
But to this point, what I was going to say was, I mean, there's a lot of problems with this article. We can get into it. But one of the biggest issues is that he doesn't really actually deal with glory.
Exactly.
He doesn't really deal with the film. He uses it as a kind of talisman to like do all this extra work for all his like his secondary or really primary arguments that he has in his, and on some levels, I agree with him. His issues with a certain kind of discourse that happens amongst the Black professional managerial class, as he would call it, or different kind of sectors. His analysis of what they should be doing, I don't agree with, and then a lot of the, I don't know, the substance of what it's supposed to be doing, I don't agree with. But
I realize I gotta pull it up on another browser so I can get my highlights or my notes real quick before. Do you have a time constraint?
No, not really.
All right. I just want to make sure. All right, let me bring it up here so that I can. This is have my notes.
Same.
Close this. All right, but that's where. So that's where, just out the gate. Occasionally on a boring flight, I'll rewatch the Battle of James Island scene from the magnificent 1989 film Glory. The scene that depicts the first engagement of the 54th Massachusetts Infantry, which is false. And please watch the Millennials episode for more on the falseness of that particular. So just out the gate, there's already so many things wrong with this. Just so. And again, we had a much more full discussion of this particular point and the reasons for it. But that you would start by saying the scene where all of these Black men sacrifice themselves in service of saving the Union is what you want to see to cure your boredom. And then to call this film magnificent, I was already like, damn, where I'm not even one full sentence in, and he's and then to say in the very next sentence that this is the first engagement. So he's got the history wrong, he's got the politics and the framing wrong. And then this idea that Black men, and then this was the line that really, at the end of this paragraph, that was the line that really pissed me off, and is why I ultimately wanted to come back and have a fuller discussion of it, because I was like, I hate this piece so much, and we didn't really give it its due justice after I suffered reading the whole thing. And it's long too, by the way, so that's the other thing. But this line here, that I pulled up the clip, so he's got this clipped. That was the other thing. I was like, you've got a clip of this just ready on a recent flight, and was moved yet again by the powerful imagery of Black men finally able to strike a blow against the slaveocracy. And I said, you've got to be fucking kidding. So this battle in 1863 is the first time Black people, and men only apparently, struck a blow against the slaveocracy. So we're just ignoring centuries of struggle. But it makes sense. To give him some credit, it makes sense that he would do this given the trajectory of the piece he's writing. So like he's done well to set up what he wants to do with this piece, because he's ultimately commenting more broadly about politics, Black struggle, I think there's a severe swipe at nationalism and all other forms of Black radical tradition politics, and it's a very condescending. And now that you just said what you said about in your preamble, I'm thinking it's like it's as if he's chastising Black people in front of the whites he's really talking to.
But that's what it tends to feel like. I mean, I think this is where like the entire piece, and I think a lot of his pieces, it goes into this, which I think is like essentially, and he probably wouldn't appreciate this, a culture war argument that Black people, he wouldn't like it, but it is a culture war argument. Yeah, but he's saying if Black people's kind of moral character around how they work within the cultural sphere and they understand the American project, that politically they could become more in tune with the actual like egalitarian values that they should have. Right. But that to me always comes off. It does come off like a very moralist. I mean, in some ways, he's like Morgan Freeman to Trip in the film. He becomes him essentially. If you Negroes, remember, and I'm sure he
you so full of hate.
Yeah, you so full of hate. What's ain't no Negroes around here except you. Except you, And
you're the problem with all
the radical dying for you. The white boys out there dying for you. I dug the graves. I dug the graves.
Bernie Sanders is out here dying for you, fool.
I dug his grave.
I dug his political grave down there in South Carolina.
Oh man,
where he actually went, right? He went down there to campaign for Sanders, right?
Yeah. I mean,
remember he had to go. He went with, was it Cornell? Where he went with somebody to lecture the Black community.
Yeah,
wow, that's what he was doing. Oh shit, I forgot about that. He went down there to lecture the Black South Carolinians who were hesitant to support Sanders, and he was like, "Get over it, fool! You so full of anger and hate." Bernie out here dying for you, fool. I dug the grave.
So one of the lines in the and to kind of add to that, like, so one of the things he ends up really doing is this. He gets into this thing about identification. He doesn't say identification, but like people, wanting to identify with particular things. But in his opening paragraph, he's totally admitting he does that himself. I mean, to clip out a sequence of a bunch of Black men, taking a blow against the slaveocracy, imagining what that felt like, is totally the transference he's criticizing, right? Except he thinks that transference, I guess, is okay because it's celebrating his project. And this is where like the whole article is chaotic, because it's like you're criticizing it, but then also you can do it, I guess, because you have the right read, because no pun intended, or maybe pun intended. And the other part, because, and then we'll get to it, is because he really leans on this shit about historical accuracy, but never actually proves the historical accuracy of.
Well, he's already gotten it wrong.
Right.
He's already gotten it from the beginning. And then, as he says here in Glory's, so this was his point, though. So from even back when I was a young, not fully politicized man, like the white savior argument was readily apparent, readily made. Everybody seemed, even people who were saying, look, I basically like the film, but it was kind of like, it is a white savior film. It was like, I love Denzel, I love Morgan Freeman, I love the movie, whatever people might have been saying, everybody seemed to have been clear. And then obviously people were more critical at the time. I remember there was a lot being said at the time, and there were people making the appropriate points about, it's a white savior film. So when I'm shocked even still a little bit to see Reed coming back in 2018 to say, no, first of all, of all the films to use and all of the media to pull from, to go back to this film, to a 1989 film, and say, no, you all have it wrong. That it's watching it this time, I remembered how startled I had been when Glory was released to learn that many people, including blacks and people on the left, dismissed or disparaged the film as a white savior narrative, a phrase that is now a routine derogation of certain cross-racial sagas of resistance to white supremacy. In Glory's case, this complaint arose mainly in response to the historically accurate depiction of the regiment's commanding officers as Northern whites. So again, not our focus here today. Please go see the Millennials discussion we had about the film. It is wildly historically inaccurate in ways that I didn't even realize until we did that show. Like it's more historically inaccurate and diabolically inaccurate than I even realized. So, but his point here is to say that because of our hatred of the white savior narrative, we are resistant to the idea of a very important cross-racial resistance movement that we should be appreciating in 2018 and apparently in 2026 without a specific focus on black people, i.e. Black Lives Matter, as if that is in itself a legit representation of. So it's just what he's doing here was just so bizarre to me that to deny that this film is a white savior narrative, to then say that it's accurate, and then to miss the very simple point. I remember in undergrad, I took a creative writing course, and I wrote a very terrible short story about the real life experience I suffered in the Navy. All right. And the professor, to his credit, was very honest and real. And he said, I don't know if he used the word terrible, but he was very clear. Like, this is terrible. Your story is terrible. And my response to him was, but it's true. And his response to me was, that is irrelevant. It's still a poorly told story. And my point here is the fact that to the extent that Glory is based in reality and tells the story of real people, never mind the historical inaccuracies that we uncover in that episode, the simple fact that it tells the story as through the lens of Robert Shaw, Matthew Broderick, the white savior, makes it a white savior narrative. In other words, as we talk about, I think in a very fun, wonderful discussion, there are millions of different ways you could have told this exact story that don't center the white man and make him the savior. But that's not what this film does. So for Reed, in all of his mature intelligence, to not make and catch that very simple point is bizarre. But then again, he has to do that.
So to add to your point, to claim historical accuracy in a movie that is 2 hours long about I don't know, it would be, well, I think for the film it actually would end up being longer. I think the film depicts it like about almost like a year of life for Shaw. In actual, it probably would have been a little bit less, because I think the regiment formed in like February, and then where the movie ends is like in like July. So there you go, right there.
Except we still have to have a Merry Christmas scene.
Of course. Well, they needed Andre Braugher, Robert. I mean, that
part of our discussion was so funny to me because I didn't catch that shit. I was like, there's a Christmas scene.
And it didn't even need to be there. It's actually not there. They just needed snow falling, right? But to hinge on accuracy on a film that also is on purpose made to be from the perspective of a single individual, right, is also just, if Reed, I don't know if Reed calls himself a Marxist or a materialist. I don't know how he would phrase himself, but that would actually go against the that kind of analysis, right? It actually would go against that, because there's no way from a subjective point of view of Shaw to account for the totality and say this is accurate. No, it would then, even if it was the most detailed, which it isn't, too, right? And Jay, and shout out to Jay, because I actually did not know the point that all of the letters that are read that were read in the movie aren't real. They're made up by screenwriters. These actually aren't, and he makes that claim. Reed makes the claim in the article that these are. He would lead you to believe, or he believes, that these are actually taken from Shaw's actual diaries and letters that he wrote. They were not. They were,
which I believed up until Wednesday.
Yeah,
I didn't know that until Wednesday.
I knew that they were rewritten a little bit, but I didn't. And I knew things were cut out. I knew all the stuff that was cut out about his, but I didn't realize they were complete. Yeah, no,
I assumed it was selective. It was like you assume he's gonna leave out the part where he's writing to his, like, I can't wait to smash when I get it. I know, you're not gonna. He's right to his girlfriend, right. You're not gonna include all
these lower class whites, man. I can't hang with these cats. I want my Hawthorne.
These poor ass crackers. Why are we even doing? I'm sure they cleaned it up. But to your point, they're all fake.
Yeah, all.
They tell you these letters are real. They're housed at Harvard, which is true. But then they go and recite a completely fictional. The movie is fucking diabolical, and for Reed not to catch it, and then to build his really poor argument on that is bad.
It's bad.
That was bad.
So it's just it's. To make the kind of, I guess, conversation he would want to have right now about white savior narratives, we'll get into that. He would need to get on a better foot. He doesn't even start on a good foot. The foot is just wrong because it isn't historically accurate, and actually, in a way, it could never actually be, right? So why are you using that as like the strength of why Glory? And this is what he does, because if you go through the article, he doesn't really talk about the movie at all.
Because all he wanted to do is say it's not a white savior film, so that he could go on to making the rest of these arguments. So but that's the whole thing. It's like, why then? Again, why then pick this film? Why then use it in this way? Why, why is this? I'm assuming he's telling the truth. This particular love affair for this movie, I've always, before even preparing for Wednesday's show, I just always kind of thought of it as referencing something that probably was kind of happened, had some good acting performances, had the meme of my life with Denzel's tear, and that was it. Like it had never factored in as something that I would refer back to build this long argument. Like that's the other thing. I was like, I'm not going to just read this whole thing. We're not going to talk about it for more than, I was like, I read this whole thing, and I'm like, so I just don't understand it at all. And by the way, even in the video essay I referenced earlier, she makes all these references to films, and I know it's in the context of biraciality and not the Civil War, but she's using all of these examples from film to make her point that he could have done in terms of the white savior that she did in terms of biraciality. But he doesn't, he doesn't, because I don't think it's like, I'm not taking it that seriously as a topic. I'm a good writer. I can write a lot, and then the people I'm talking to, the ignorant blacks and the sophisticated whites, neither group know enough about the details of these histories to catch all the shit I'm leaving out. So I don't need to take it that seriously to appease both, my self-defined messages for each audience. So that anyway.
Well, I think that kind of goes to your point about who he probably, I don't know, maybe in the forefront or the back of his brain or his consciousness thinks his audience is. Because like this will go to a clapping audience, right? Of, you know, social democrats, white DSA folks, and certain people even on the black left who agree with kind of Reed's vision. They're just going to go, yes, thank you, Adolph, right?
Yeah.
And then the people that he's already against, they're going to just be mad at it, right? And he's and for him, he doesn't really care in that way. And like this line right here, okay, like this to me is just lazy, man. I'm just going to read it. This is lazy, notwithstanding some artistic license. Like, first of all, that line does not excuse the rest. He makes it like it excuses what's about to come, including free slaves within the 54th, when it was actually composed of entirely free black men. What? Wait, whoa! Whoa, that's majorly historically inaccurate. Glory,
another one.
Director Edward Zwick clearly intended to be a historical film. How could it not feature white officers? I mean, that's... I would call it sleek if it wasn't so obvious.
But again, shout out to our discussion, because we get into some of this and explain that the film does the reverse of the real history by overemphasizing the amount of unfree, formerly enslaved who were involved, and underemphasizes the amount of so-called free black men. He just says here they were all free, and that's not true. So that's just the other part. But then this whole, how could it not feature white officers? In my own inexpertise, it takes not even 5 seconds to think of endless ways, even before I learned all that I learned about the history that is not in the film accurately, that we talk about in that discussion. But he just says it right here. You have an entire regiment comprised of mostly black men, and yet he then wants to fall back on, why wouldn't it focus on the white officers? You just said it's mostly black men. Pick one of them. Pick one, if not a handful, and make them the centerpiece and tell the story. And then obviously, as we talk more about in our discussion, the white officers would be there. They would be characters. They might even have a scene or two. You could make it known. You have 2.5 hours and writers and people to figure this out. But you could tell the story easily through, I mean, Tripp's character could have been told. It could have been told through Denzel. I mean, Morgan's character. It could have been told through it could have been told through Snowflake's character.
And this is where him as such a person who's big on class, this is actually, he's also acknowledging the history of class films. And that let's take race out of it. Right? Make it a strictly class-based film. The actual critique still exists. And it's been a long critique within cinema that you would feature the New England higher classed person over the proletariat, lumpen proletariat soldiers, right? There's a film in the 70s based on a book called The Friends of Eddie Coyle with Robert Mitchum. I don't know if people have seen this movie. It's a good movie. It's about a low-level button who basically... in the Boston Mafia, right? And basically it's about his kind of toils to try to basically kind of get himself, you know, out of a jam that he's in, right? But he's like low totem pole, right? And the whole Friends is used ironically because he's a low totem pole person, right? He basically just gets the shit end of the stick. But none of the high-end mafia people are featured. And the whole film was about this kind of movement to break, always focusing on the Michael Corleones and not the Luca Brazzis.
Right.
So this is it's a long critique. So as a person who's so obsessed with class, with Reed, he should know this. This is exactly that, right? We place black people in class society. The same shit applies. You're doing the same thing that always happens.
That's a good point. And again, he can't do that because this isn't the point he's trying to make with this piece. This is not a critique of the film Glory. This is a critique of us. And increasingly, I am thinking it's a critique of black people for a white audience. So the I guess ostensibly the black reader of this piece is meant to be the I don't know, like the quiet, distant audience member while Reed is sitting with his white experts and executives, or maybe the film directors and and you know, on the stage talking down to them. I don't know, something like that. And then he calls it the greatest American film ever made. Or was he talking? Yeah, right. He's talking about. Wait, is he talking? Maybe he's not talking. Maybe I'm. All such judgments are
no, he's talking about it.
But I was left scratching my head. Ideologically charged reaction to what made. Yeah, right. Because he's saying, how could you all have this reaction to the greatest American film ever made? And again, he's writing this in 2018,
which is
so it's not like you could even. Not that it would have been true in 1989, but you could. You know, it's like you've had all these other decades, 30 more years to reflect on how incorrect a statement this would be. Or to maybe just talk to somebody else, you know.
Well, he does have one other point in there that I want to kind of.
Sure.
He says, leaving aside the fact that more Black characters than white ones have autonomous voices and personalities, the film was largely based on Shaw's moving letters home, which are compiled in the volume Blue-Eyed Child of Fortune, which is a wild title for a memoir. All such judgments are idiosyncratic, to be sure. And this is where, Reed, to me, I think he's able to kind of do something slick. Because what happens, I think, a lot of the times is people who have legitimate gripes with a certain kind of discourse, right? Or like the levels, even people like us, the levels the discourse goes to. Right, they'll say, look, man, Reed's getting at this discourse that you don't like that much, that you know is reductive. All right, I'm gonna read it. And he doesn't really go into it. And he just basically says it's just idiosyncratic. To say it's idiosyncratic, right, basically kind of dismisses it as a kind of like it's lost in jargon, rather than people, or actually is just jargon, rather than people are possibly seeing something, but maybe they don't have the vocabulary or the methodology to really extrapolate what's going on here, which is what really the issue is. It is a white savior movie. Does everyone have the best analysis on that? No, because they don't have the methodology. They don't have the tools, the understanding. They haven't read. They haven't done the knowledge. But instinct is instinct. And you get from semiotics and you're in a position, you're like, wait a minute, this thing seems weird. Why is this white man always up on the horse, right? That's a certain kind of language. Why are the Black people here? We talked about it, like when they first get the soldiers, they're all kind of milling around aimlessly, and you're like, so basically, Black people who are not enslaved right now just kind of mill around aimlessly until they figure themselves out, and you know, the military gives them some kind of order, right? I mean, it's like they're noticing something. But he is basically saying, oh, you're just being idiosyncratic with these like little bit of things. And I get it. It probably isn't the most developed discourse. And it does always go back to, Oscars so white, which are things that are not productive. I totally agree with that. And I know we both agree with that, right? But you can't say that the germ, or maybe for him, that the germ of it, the very root of it, does not have weight, based on all types of analysis that he claims to believe in terms of class and social position and how we're representing people and so forth and so on.
All good points. And I'm also just now realizing, because I had read this before we did the show, where it was revealed to me that the letters in the film are fake. His reference to the collection of them is additionally meaningless, or even a confession that he didn't read what he's referencing. Because if you read it, you would recognize that what you saw in the film was some bullshit. But yeah, anyway, he refers to it again as in terms of tales of inspiration and uplift. I've long suspected that to a certain strain of race conscious or anti-racist discourse, because again, this is who he's talking. Those of you with a race consciousness, you damnable, corruptible, condemnable, Black people with your race consciousness? How dare you have a race or how dare you engage in anti-racist discourse? But those of you who do, as these historical exploration and popular culture was less important than the propagation of tales of inspiration and uplift. And I'm sitting here saying, so this is the same kind of argument that I admit as a supporter of materialist logics that I've not liked in the materialist critique of Afrocentricity or African-centered thought, for instance, where people like Reed would say, all you're interested in is glorifying your race with tales regaling Africa and this, that, and the third. And it's like, no. Particularly the more serious scholars in those wings or those fields, they're not doing it just to create tales of inspiration and uplift. That may be a logical conclusion of an accurate history that returns people to their rightful place on world stage, as Dr. Clark used to say. But what he's ignoring is how media and film in particular are used by empire to do that for the colonists. So are we to say that it's only the powerless, race-conscious anti-racists who dream of making films that inspire and uplift, or that would, and whites and colonizers don't do this? That they haven't created entire industries to self-congratulate? Are we not? Didn't they just make another new film where whites are the Africans and I don't even, never mind. But you know what I'm saying? So it's like, how could you not? But it's the powerless, those with no control of the means of production, who have to look for some, who have to, mine through the media. Can I find myself somewhere?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, wow, son, that was wild.
Yeah. And like, I don't know, to say, so this paragraph coupled with his first paragraph about him admitting to clipping a battle scene and watching that shit when he's bored. I mean, come on, bro. Like, have some self-awareness first off. Like that. I remember when I first read that. That's what I caught. I was like, wait a minute. And I couldn't get past this like first opening part. I think it took me like a day to get past this part because I was so frustrated. But the other thing is that, well, I guess not even the other thing is attached to this, right? These fables typically feature singular Black heroes who have overcome crushing racist adversity against all odds. And it's like, sure, if you're going to critique that style, it can't be because that style has Black people. You have to critique the style in itself, right? And this is where I think his liberalism, I don't know if he would like that either, classic liberalism to me shines through, because he's kind of, if I had to make like a kind of like a cinematic analysis, if this was like a real cinematic kind of I wouldn't consider it because he doesn't really deal with the film, but let's say it is, right? What I would say is, well, implicitly what you're saying is the forms are actually okay. It's the fact that they need to put Black people in it. They feel this need to put Black people in it is the wrong thing. The form isn't bad. And if you do it under a particular project like Glory, right, it's okay. It's okay. And it's like, okay, well, now you're admitting that this kind of form of movie making is actually okay. Right. Which is, I think, I don't, and that goes to me. That's also an argument where it does line up with his politics of what he thinks about this overall society. And I remember when I was reading this piece, and it really became very clear to why I don't connect with his political project. I was like, yeah, okay, this is where him and I have a big divergence. But then he just calls, people like on our side nationalists as like a slur.
And it also it's additionally disrespectful. I didn't catch this initially, but in your rereading, it's pretty clear that I would argue that what he's describing as this typically these fables that typically feature singular Black heroes who overcome crushing racist adversity, that these again are counterinsurgent liberal rebrandings of Black struggle that are meant to appease an under politically educated audience that does want some race conscious or anti-racist discourse. So that's the point, that you make it an individual overcoming as opposed to a community or society or anything like that. And then people say, yeah, man, that one Black man did it, man. In the same way we were, when we grew up on some of the Blaxploitation stuff, we were meant to see one Black man just beating up everybody. It's again, they have Rambo and we got Shaft, but all of that was done for some variation of liberal counterinsurgency that he should be calling out, as opposed to saying, but he's more interested in dismissing these silly Negroes that want some race consciousness, or want to engage in some anti-racist discourse. That's right. And then we got Django, exactly,
which then he criticizes
accurately. So like there's a couple films he calls out, justifiably calling them out, but to somehow not see that Glory is doing some version of that is wild to me. Why is the white dude in Django with Jamie Foxx different? Because it's different from Shaw and his crew. Why? Because it's not cartoon. Because it's cartoonish. And Tarantino, and this is done more seriously. Because it's claiming to be based in some reality. So if Tarantino had put up there based on a real story real quick, like they do with Fargo or some shit, people would be like, he'd have been like, oh, that's all right then. That's all right. Yeah. Because he's right to call out, like Red Tails is terrible. So he's right about that. I think he's right to call out Django Unchained. He's right to call out Selma. I think he does it for all the wrong reasons, but he's right to call these films out. And if anything, it's in this context, he should be realizing that what we're getting in Glory was not some break from all of this. It's not like Glory sucked and then we got all of these terrible films. Like Glory paves the way for this nonsense. What was I saying here? Oh, I was just up. Like even this, I took this as a shot at King that he's it's like, but all right, I don't want to. Why take a shot at Dr. King just by saying surreptitious negotiations with Johnson? I mean, whatever, man. All right. And how were they surreptitious? I thought the whole point was to try to get Johnson to sign a bill, and King had been saying that for years. Like, we're trying to get this bill signed. Like, he does that a lot. He does a little pot shots that don't have like a real substantive hit, and I'm like, what he calls the Du Bois a liberal. Yeah, I mean. It's like, what? That's wild. And again, right, he's right to. I had many problems with Nate Parker's Birth of a Nation film. So I don't have a problem with him. What does he say here? He's agreeing with the LA Review of Books that for Parker, the point of history is not so much to figure out what really happened, but rather to enable reparative and redemptive myth-making. And for me, the redemptive myth-making was in defense of the country, just as Glory is. That by the end of the film, I always took Nate Parker, and we talk about this in the Millennial Show in more depth, but I always took what Nate Parker was doing as a similar thing to Glory, not through a white savior, but by ultimately wanting us to find acceptance in Black revolutionary violence only in the context of the Union Army, which is why we don't get to see the revolutionary violence. And I always remember, like, you get hours of watching Black people get brutalized in that film. And by the time of Nat's Rebellion, there's no real white suffering on screen. Like, it's really, and the one that I always remember is that when he busts in the room and you see the slave master removing the Black child that he's molesting, and then all you see is the blood splatter on the wall. And I was like, what is this Hitchcock shit? This 1950? We just watched people getting their teeth bashed out and black people suffering this and suffering that. And then as soon as I just thought the film was, so I agree that it deserves the criticism. But again, Reed is only bringing it up to say that it's another in this race conscious attempt to myth make some sort of proud black, victory, when as if all these white films, including Glory, that he's praising, don't do the same thing, that they're not about myth making and whatever else. So
there is a direct line from Glory to Nate Parker's Nat Turner film.
Mm-hmm.
They feel like a couplet, and like historical direct line, meaning that it's a direct line, meaning where we were in Hollywood history, right? If you have the way the liberal kind of project worked in Hollywood, Glory was the thing, right? So it walked, so eventually Nate Parker's film can run, right? Because that's literally what it is. I mean, the ending of that film is like probably what the beginning of Glory is supposed to be, right? Like it's supposed to, if anything, you watch Nate Parker's film before you watch Glory, right? And that's the whole thing. And for him to not make that connection is odd. I'm not a psychoanalyst, but like that's very odd. But maybe I could, make some guesses of why he wouldn't see those connections.
I mean, or he could even, I think you make a really good point. I was even just trying to think what that chronologically it would go reverse out of the order of history, so that you could, when you see the end of Glory and the flag fall and Trip die, the little boy at the end of Nate Parker's film who picks up the flag after snitching on that.
He's the one.
He's the one.
He's the one, right?
Marching on the Black freedom,
Exactly.
But what Reed should be saying is, for all the flaws in Nate Parker's film, we've had dozens of Civil War films that don't even mention Nat Turner, as is the case with Glory, that erases, as does Reed's story that this article starts with him saying the first time black men struck a blow against the slaveocracy. What?
I mean, come on. All the ship rebellions. I mean, do we
I should do it now that I'm doing, it's my summer of YouTube. I should do this, like, and go back and, one of my favorite parts of those Aptheker Negro History of the United States series is the part around Nat Turner and and not even just that, but the chapter is called Machinery of Control in one of the books, where he's talking about all of the white press concern over slave rebellion and insurrection. And I think I'm quoting accurate that line from some military leader who was saying we better free them on our terms before they free themselves on their own. Like they were Aptheker's point is that whites were terrified. This idea that they weren't in a constant state of fear over how to manage the plantation and that society, so to act like everything was quiet and chill until the 54th showed up.
Well, and that's where Jay's really, really good line, the integrationist wretched of the earth, I think really, really sits. And shout out to Jay Ware for that.
He does deserve a shout out to that, and he deserves a.
Now listen, that's called my boy. You know nothing about that.
And I do wish he was here to get his flowers for that part. I'm gonna shout him out again for that, because he said in our text group, I said I was going to quote him, and but he said after reading this, he said this is the integrationist wretched of the earth.
And that hits, because for him, for Reed, the revolution only happened when we got to being in the soldier, when we got that blue suit.
When we got that blue suit?
When we got that blue suit, right? And Morgan Freeman got, he got his stripes, right? And Denzel was able to plant that flag in and say, "Come on," you know. Right. The other thing we didn't call out was Andre Brower's yell. Andre Brower, if people remember the movie, Andre Brower in the final fight sequence has this like wild, like, you know, like animal call.
And I was thinking you could just see them off camera saying, you know, Andre, can we get a little more? Can we get another take?
Thomas has to let go.
This is Thomas's catharsis.
You know, especially after Carrie Elways, as you know.
Oh, I'm telling you, you got to do that and get the John Wick club music underneath it, where he's going. I mean, it did. I did. It was like I did think that I'm watching John Wick with swords. Like, dude is like if John Wick was in the blue suit, this is what he would have looked like.
That's what it looked like. Whoa. I had to watch it again because the dude tries to hit him with like a flamethrower, and he just does like the little hit and just and I'm like, oh.
And there's another part where he like does the little duck under and flip the dude over him, and I was like, what?
Yes.
I said the stunt man is doing some work in this scene here. I can't like, Carrie ain't doing none of that. I was like, that's not. Go ahead, and you know, speaking of stuntmen, I don't think this must not have been a real person. There's a part where they're storming that in Fort Wagner. I forgot to mention it the other day, where if you're watching, you see this explosion and you see one of the 54 troop, like the body goes way. And I remember thinking like, huh?
It's dolls.
Yeah, no, it had. Yeah. I know it wasn't a person, but I remember thinking like, when I saw it the other day before the show, I was thinking, did this was like something unexpected happened? Like it was like this wasn't the plan, and they were like, just leave it in. It's dramatic. Because I was like, it kind of took it out of the thing. It's like, I'm sure this probably happened. If you're close enough to the explosion, you could get thrown that high up in the air, I'm sure. But it just looked really out of place because it was just one. Way up.
Yeah. Whoa.
I said, whoa. He said, nah, leave it in. It's good for the scene.
Looks real.
Yeah, but what else? What was I saying here? Oaths of Fire, the western part of anti-slavery, anti-Negro liberation as the only safeguard against. Oh, I highlighted this here because this is what I know. My point was that because here Reed is talking about in his condemnation of Nate Parker's film, he's saying in quoting. He said, Warren readily concedes that Parker, though clearly knowing of them, had no obligation to broaden his narrative to include such entailments. Still, it is far from inconsequential to note the political legacy of Turner's 1831 uprising in the state that would later serve as the capital of the Confederacy. Whites launched a searching debate over the possibility of manumission. So he was bringing this up because he keeps wanting, that is, Reed keeps wanting to point out the cross-racial aspect of everything. So yeah, Nat Turner did what he did, but one of the positives is that it made white people rethink freeing black people. And then he ends here by saying, yes, the liberation of all of Virginia's. So in other words, Warren quotes Stephen Oates' The Fire of Jubilee, Nat Turner's Fierce Rebellion, which notes that in the western part of the state where anti-slavery and anti-Negro sentiment had long been stirring, whites held public rallies in which they openly endorsed emancipation. Yes, the liberation of all of Virginia's 470,000 slaves as the only safeguard in these dangerous times. And I was saying, but that's the point that Reed is previously ignoring in saying that nobody did anything until the 54 showed up. Here, even though I don't agree with his framing of it, he's saying, Nat Turner is saying, making them white folks say, maybe we better go ahead and free these fools because, not because we give a shit, but as the only safeguard. That was Aptheker's point. So why is Reed denying that and then trying to create this as some sort of false cross-racial it's a weird, it's just weird. It's weird what he's doing here. So it's not and again, if you want to build a case for cross-racial solidarity, why would these be the way? I don't understand. I mean, you could, like, he doesn't talk about Bacon's Rebellion even. Like, you could, if you really wanted to point to something that, I don't know. Warren notes they put truth rarely in the South, namely it has never been solidly pro-slavery as anti. Right. So this is, again, he's saying, right, again, I think for some odd reason trying to downplay how racist this country is. So he says here, however, as Warren notes, they point to a truth rarely narrated about the South, namely that it has never been as solidly pro-slavery or even as anti-Black as popular imagination has depicted it. And I just find this to be an odd argument to make. So again, as a materialist, I think there are better ways he could have done it. You know, if you really want to make the point, I've always found it fascinating that written in separate times, and I don't think Du Bois referencing him, both Du Bois and Marx reach basically the same numbers, that only 7% owned about 77% of all the enslaved, meaning that most whites did not own anyone. But what they also point out, Du Bois in particular, in Black Reconstruction, which Jay also brings up importantly, is that this does create a sort of anti-self-interest, anti-Black racism as well. Like, it's not like just because most of these whites didn't own anyone that they weren't adopting anti-Black attitudes. And then ultimately, to me, it doesn't matter if the South wasn't as racist or anti-Black as the popular imagination has depicted it, because institutionally it was. And James Baldwin, I always thought, had a great point on this. You don't judge racism by individuals, you judge it by its institutions. And how did the institutions of the South in particular address themselves to Black people? And if you know, and to suggest that that is somehow less anti-Black than popular imagination would be bizarre again to me as well. Especially as he's writing at a time that I believe, and he's talking about the late 1800s. Isn't this Ida B. Wells's heyday? In at least in part. So it's like, how? So you're ignoring all of her work and all of the work that she represented and all of the other to try to make this point, because again, he's talking in 2018 to the Black Lives Matter community and to the race conscious community that you're doing too much. This country isn't as bad as you think it is. It's not as racist as you think it is. And you're in part confused because you're not watching Glory properly.
Yeah. So to this point, and this kind of brings in when he starts talking about Bernie and things like that. I was talking to a comrade yesterday. We were just having a discussion, and we're talking about like social democracy. And he was saying one of the things about social democracy that he said that we always have to remember is social democracy lives because of imperialism, right? Because they need something to basically either say imperialism doesn't exist, it's not real, it happened at a period, it isn't a real factor, right? This argument by Reed, and kind of throughout the article, someone had wrote economism in there, and I said, yeah, you know, this is true. I would agree with that when it comes to Reed and his really social democrat way of thinking about stuff. In stamping out imperialism, you could also say that about white supremacy. That's part of the imperial framework. He needs to reduce that in this kind of social democratic framework of how we need to be a part of the American project, see ourselves as part of the project, right? Because that's something else I've seen more of the, or this might be one of more like his disciples that I've heard. One of the arguments I've heard them kind of make is that Black history is American history. But how they frame that as an idea is that we shouldn't really have a class society analysis of race as a kind of forefronted thing. Race is a kind of secondary contradiction, right? It's not a primary, right? And it isn't a driving force within class society formations, right? So you have to constantly reduce this. But then I always find it very interesting. The people who argue for this shit are the same people when it comes to things like imperialism. They're always like, well, if Hamas didn't, do that, maybe things be a little bit better. I mean, Cuba, are they really socialist? Maduro, was he not a drug dealer? Right?
And of course, the boogeyman of Stalin.
And that's where the Trotskyist part comes in. It's like it's part of that kind of line and the Western Marxism and that whole kind of thought. And I find it consistently, but like to kind of get to that point, it is economism. It's this idea that it's not a primary contradiction. It's not it's more of a byproduct, right? It's like racism is this kind of like thing that kind of dribbles out, right? Rather than something that actually is a part of the social formation. And to be honest with you, if you read Marx in a real way, if you read Marx's like German ideology and all this stuff about the camera obscura and all that type of stuff, no, you actually don't do the ideological look of Marx. You've made Marx into economism, into a purely an economic theory, right? This is where, like, honestly, I'll always go to Rodney and always go to Cabral. I won't go to these people because they understand also that ideological formation of the entire thing. And that's the thing. And so I was like, throughout the article, when I was reading, and I was like, dude, you really are just trying to get people to say social democracy is the way. Buy into this project and buy into the parts of the project that give this integration, this scope that has us aligned with it. And he's using, which I do say, look, I'm someone who comes from the movie world. I have tons of frustration with the Black bourgeoisie and how they look to do a kind of, I don't even know what you want to call the word, their kind of integrationism, right? I totally get that, right? But the antidote is not forget about the race stuff. It's secondary. Think about this kind of project that we could all get together here in America.
And the antidote is not to tell me that Glory is a good movie.
And through that, tell me Glory is a good fucking, and Free State of Jones, right? Are good movies.
Now, real quick, because this hour, actually, I didn't even realize this hour went quick. Do you have a few more minutes, or how are you on time? Because
I gotta leave in like 15. Yeah.
All right, let me get back to this article at least a little bit. And let me just pull up a couple of things real quick. And if there's something that you definitely wanted to bring up, let me know.
Do it.
But I just was looking at my notes for what so he makes this point here, but white savior objections to Glory and Free State of Jones are different matter. Those because he goes through some of the history where he appropriately calls out Cry Freedom, like I hate that movie, like all this, like he gets some things right, which is why there is some there's a foundation that is helpful to have before you engage this piece, which is I know he's counting on you not having, so that he can get away with some of this. But after sharing some of that accurate criticism of these other white savior films, he's saying that the white savior objection to Glory and Free State are a different matter. While he's saying that because Glory and Free State hinge largely on the prominence of Black agency, which race-first critics apparently deem irrelevant. Their objection is not that Black's agency is absent, it is rather about who is represented in as leading their efforts. So I disagree with this. My note here is that Black agency literally funded and whipped into them by whites who needed them and who would then abandon them immediately. So in other words, it's a kind of Black agency that a white liberal film would want to promote, and that a colonial settler media apparatus would want to promote. It's, again, my criticism of Parker's Birth of a Nation, that you're saying that the antidote to the white Birth of a Nation is to tell the story of Nat Turner, ultimately only to show that the only acceptable form of Black agency and rebellion is in the blue suit. That's what we get in droves in Glory, because again, we really break it down. Please watch the millennials discussion. But there's no reference to Black-led insurrection, to Black-led rebellion, to the centuries of it, to the internationalism of it, to the fact that they were in communication with one another. They knew about Haiti. They knew about Vessey's plot was damn near global in scope. Like folks so the idea that everybody, as Glory would want us to have, that everybody was kind of sitting around waiting for the blue suit and the white man to give up these guns and the new shoes and socks is crazy. It's crazy. And that Reed would make this as his argument is just bizarre. It's like, it's not even a good job of making the bad argument he wants to make, which is what I found. Anyway, did you have anything on that?
Only thing I would say is it reeks of an analysis of this and the Revolutionary War that they only want to kind of half acknowledge the class character of the soldiers in both of those wars. And it's still, it reeks of a kind of bourgeois revolution stagist kind of orientation, right? This is where I would have questions for him. Well, what do you think about this and this and that? Because like this idea of agency, that automatically they have agency. I mean, that can be largely in question based on simple the wants of the bourgeoisie and the people who were doing the war effort. I mean, like historically, come on, like you're just gonna blatantly say that? Why? Because they're featured in a movie?
But again, what is the agency like? So again, Denzel got an Oscar because we see him get whipped.
Right.
Because you look to exercise your agency outside of the prescribed rules. Like, what are you talking about? You can, again, we don't see any discussion of or reference to what I'm sure existed. What if Thomas's character are you telling me that there was no relatively Black bougie segment of the North that was like, fuck these motherfuckers too? Like nobody was up there thinking about burning down Thomas's house or Robert's house rather. Like, I don't understand. Anyway, my point is there are so many other ways that a film could address itself to class politics, to racial politics, framed very differently that we don't get to see. And then, as he says here, that he's part of his point is to say that the critics of Glory are ignoring class, which is, I don't know, the striking hostilities he says here to such a politics within the higher reaches of anti-racist activism illustrates the extent to which what bills itself as Black politics today is in fact a class politics. It is not interested in the concerns of working people of whatever race or gender. So again, if you see this film and say, I don't like a white savior film, you're somehow speaking against Black workers? Because you're
doing too much. You doing too much, Adolph. You doing way too much there. And this movie doesn't have a class analysis really in itself also. So like to make that claim, you would have to say the film has a really distinct class analysis that people are refusing because of a leaning on a trope argument.
So speaking of trope arguments, this is the one thing I noted in here, this reference to Raj Chetty. It's and the note I made here is that he uses the Chetty Coates straw, because I'm saying he's doing something similar to Ta-Nehisi Coates. What about a real left critique? So in other words, he's saying, for instance, it is also telling that the study that provoked the media reports, these media reports that are critical of the white savior narrative. It is also telling that the study that provoked the media reports, Raj Chetty, Race and Economic Opportunity in the United States, an Intergenerational Perspective, rehearses the hoary recommendation that reducing the intergenerational persistence of the black-white income gap will require policies whose impacts cross neighborhood and class lines and increase upward mobility, specifically for black men. These include mentoring programs for black boys, et cetera, and so forth. That's a pretty thin gruel warmed over bromides and all too familiar paternalism and no actually redistributive policies at all. So my point about the Chetty Coates thing is that you've pulled out one straw study that is used by liberals to defend liberal solutions attached to criticism of white savior narratives instead of addressing yourself to actual radical critiques of both the film and society that would cause many problems for your argument here. So for instance, just for the example, you and I are both sitting here saying we don't like the film Glory, we don't like the white savior narrative, and we also don't like the liberal intermediaries who would offer up solutions like the ones he's critical of here. That, in fact, speaking for myself, I'm arguing films like Glory and defenses of it like Reed's are protecting the prestige layer of fat that George Jackson describes that are meant to protect the fascism by presenting this beautiful liberal fantasy of a history of enslavement and civil war and of a pathway forward. And I just, I did read this, by the way. He took a swipe at Glenn Ford and Black Agenda. I know that they've had a long-standing disagreement even before he passed away, so that Reed could come back here and say the gatekeeping question has for more than a century focused on who speaks for Black Americans and determines the Black agenda, in quotes. And of course, Glenn Ford.
Catch that. Thank you for. I missed that.
Well, it's also, yeah, I mean, it's also that I just know that Glenn had these beefs. And people would do this to him in particular all the time. And Glenn's argument was always very clear. It's not that Black people are a quote unquote monolith in reality. It's that it's politically mature to operate as one and to have certain Black agenda related items specific to the concerns of a Black community. And Reed and others particularly have always had this hostility to that, suggesting that ultimately what's good for the whites will be good for us too. And as I'm oversimplifying it, and instead of engaging the argument substantively, and obviously Glenn could have, defended himself quite well, they do this type of stuff even after his death. Anyway, now that's exactly, at least how I read it. He could have been talking more specifically about the Black Lives Matter folks who are using a version of those claims too. Of course, Glenn was critical of them. So, but anyway, so that's why he goes over this relatively quick and silly. He starts going to, recounting of Du Bois and Garvey and saying it's oversimplified so that the people of today in the Black Lives Matter world can do silly things. And he points to people, to the point I was making earlier, like he mentions Tia Oso by name. Calling her the self-proclaimed Black voice was brought front and center at the 2015 Netroots presidential town hall featuring Martin O'Malley and Bernie Sanders, which he was upset about because I think that they were somewhat critical of Sanders and around reparations and whatnot. But I met Tia at one point and had some criticisms of her political approach and that of the Black Lives Matter and all of that from a very different left perspective than Reed is acknowledging. So this, in my point being, this idea that there is this unjustified attempt among Black people to determine who should speak for Black people, while he is here doing it himself, and not even recognizing that there is a struggle within that over the liberalism and the presentation of that Black voice, is again disingenuous. I just thought it was, well, just that, disingenuous. He does go on to critique Coates a little bit. I'm just trying to get to the end here a little bit because this piece is very long. The harmony may help explain the racial voices. The black political class in general are so intent on disparaging the social democratic politics associated with Bernie Sanders, even though, so I mean, and actually I should pull this back up on stage because this is screen. This is where I think he's saying black people who are upset at my savior, at my white savior, Bernie Sanders, for being, from my perspective, insufficiently left or insufficient on the question of reparations. He's saying, how dare they? So he's saying here, the harmony that may help explain those racial voices, like the black political class in general, are so intent on disparaging the social democratic policies associated with Bernie Sanders, even though a 2017 Harvard-Harris survey found that Sanders was far more popular with African Americans than with any other demographic category except declared Democrats. This to me was sort of what he's ultimately saying. You all are being critical of Bernie. You are being politically immature. And then the point that I think he leaves out, and I'm maybe forgetting some of the timing here, but Bernie betrayed his own movement. When did Bernie back out of the Democratic National, the primary race to support Biden?
2019 it would have been, right?
So it was after this article came out. So
yeah.
Anyways.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But my point would be that
2020. It would have been in 2020. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he would have lost once in 2016. And I pointed this, I was already saying then the Democratic Party didn't want him. Then in that second one is where I admitted that if the Democratic Party had nominated him, because I was like, are they actually going to nominate him? Because he was doing well. He was clearly, and he was being the one showing he would have been the only Democratic nominee to beat Trump. But the party undermined him. And so this is sort of my point about the shortcomings of Reed's analysis. I don't know if he's evolved it around this question ever since, but you're making this argument all in defense of someone who, as Glenn and Bruce were right, and maybe that's why he said that, because Bruce would have been saying the sheepdog stuff, that Bernie is a sheepdog for the Democratic Party. Maybe that's why there was that black agenda shot in there. But that's what he proved to be. So,
yeah, I mean, the only thing I want to say, I would say it kind of encloses where I think the piece is really poor. If Reed wanted to write a piece and say a certain class of black folk have a bad argument for a film, do better in constructing your critical argument, I'd be fine with that article. No, he's saying because of a bad argument, it is further evidence that a particular project that comes out of empire. Let's get this movie comes out of empire. It is evidence that this film is not only good, but something that we should be, as black people, taking lessons from, holding up and championing. That's a bullshit bad argument. I'm sorry. Straight out. Even if I did like the movie and I did think it had some merit, I would say that actual construction has lots of problems. You need to do better within that construction. What makes it worse is this movie is a deliberate film to get black people to buy into empire, into the project. Yes, okay, a couple of black folk got bad ways that they talk about shit. Cool. That don't resurrect the movie, though. I'm sorry. It don't resurrect the movie. It doesn't change the material nature of how the film. Just look at the evidence of what it has done. The proof is in the pudding, right? Those movies that he does not like, you wouldn't have, because Glory is the reason why you have those. And it's like, come on, bro.
I do want to, if very quickly, I want to go back to this because there's one more thing I wanted to point out. We make this point more completely in our discussion on millennials. So again, people, please check that out about the film Glory. But I didn't want to let him get away with this piece here, because he's coming back to defend Glory. So he says, so as in Glory, the only one, because he's, again, to defend the point you're making, to defend Bernie and that whole condemnation of a different form of analysis in the Black community. He's marshaling this as part of his argument. So as in Glory, the only way to narrate the story without Night is as the central dramatist persona would be to abandon historical accuracy. Doing so would require a fantasy more in the order of Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, perhaps replacing Lincoln with Frederick Douglass for good measure. So remember, we were already saying you could absolutely tell the story of Glory through the perspective of any number of the men of the 54th and not through Robert, and still have whatever accuracy Reed thinks exists. So he's reframing the story with Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Then he goes on, the white savior dismissal actually may have reached its apotheosis in the preposterous assertion that neither Lincoln, the Union Army, nor Congress ended slavery, but rather the slaves somehow freed themselves, to cite a frequent criticism of another film widely dismissed on white saviorship grounds, Steven Spielberg's 2012 biopic Lincoln. And as I pointed out, I just had to revisit that part because, and I almost don't want to say it here, because if you don't know what Glory does wrong on Frederick Douglass, I do want you to go watch the Millennials piece for that reveal. But what Reed does here, I don't think it's a reveal for me to say Lincoln does not mention Douglass at all. So, and if folks want, I have an old video on my channel, critique, where I do a presentation of me critiquing Lincoln and Django from back in the day. If people want the full thing, they can go watch it. But there's no mention of Douglass at all in a discussion of Abraham Lincoln and the 13th Amendment. And so the idea that to appropriately put Douglass back in that very real history is to be equated with Vampire Hunters, a completely fantastical film. All that so Reed can say, Black people, stop condemning the white savior narrative because it's blocking you in your recognition of the saviorness of Bernie Sanders. And then ultimately, I'm assuming he would say that of Marx is the ultimate, like, final boss for him, right? That we don't appreciate Marx enough, so that if we can't get to Bernie, how could we get to Karl? But to do it in this way is so bad and so disrespectful. And I just was so irritated by it. And so on the one hand, I'm very glad you shared it with me, because I had never seen it. And but I'm very pissed that it was written. And I think but thank you for joining me to come back and talk about it.
And I thank you, because this was an exorcism I've needed for about 8 years. I remember when it came to me, I had a couple texts like, like absolutely not with people.
Yeah, I'm mad I missed it then, because I would have had a similar reaction. I'd have been falling apart over this. What is going on? But so yeah, man. So thank you very much. Please, everybody, get to Mtume's Patreon and other work. And Imperial 80s is a must. And thank you again for that. Talk about catharsis.
We needed that one. We needed to get that out.
Well, the whole series. I'm shouting you both out for the whole series. The whole series is a necessary catharsis, especially for those of us who survived that time period. And if you're a youngin' and didn't grow up watching those 80s movies, you need to respect us more, man. You need to show us more respect, man.
Yeah, Monday we're doing Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
So unfortunately, I had to schedule a thing at that, so I'm gonna have to miss the live. But I'm going to encourage that people watch that, and they can come back and watch our condemnation of the World Cup later. So to be honest, I was tempted to try to reschedule, but I can't. But it's I'm not. It's not me by myself. So
shout
I
out
can't.
to Samantha Youssef will be joining us. It'll be a good time. It'll be a good time. I'm actually gonna do a lot of learning on that one because there's a lot I want to know. But Samantha,
no, I can't wait because as I said, the last time I saw it was at a drive-in theater on several hits of LSD. So
I feel like the movie was made for that. I feel like it was made for that too.
Oh, I remember thinking vividly, oh, they made this for me. This is what you were supposed to be doing. Like none of you out here are watching this film correctly.
Get high.
Woof, man, it was there was even a couple parts I remember like it was a bit much because first of all, being confined in a car with two other people is not the best way for me to enjoy that. And then, you know, the sound is coming through the car radio and you're watching it on this big screen and it's like, it was weird. It was very weird. So yeah, folks, by all means, be there Monday. You can come back and check me and Daniel talk about the World Cup after that. And salute, man. Thank you very much. I appreciate you. This has been great. Take care, man. All right, everybody. Please make sure you're supporting Mtume. And I'm going to wrap up here in just a couple minutes, a couple super chats, and then I'm gonna revisit a couple of last minute notes on this piece here, and then we can get out of here, man. But definitely thank Mtume for coming through and helping with that. So just real quick, thank you, ZZ Lion. AdolphReed camp is the Trotskyists that love Lenin but hate Stalin, and everyone is doing communism wrong. Adolf attitude, it's okay to be black and proud without the radical revolutionaries leading. Yeah, that's about right. Thank you again. I think that's the contradiction the white left love about Adolf. It's okay to be black and proud, leave out the radical attitude. White liberal leftists would appreciate us more, I'm sure. And welcome, Fat Dooney. All right, welcome. And then, yeah, I noticed this one earlier. Definitely, Danny Glover tried for over 40 years to make a film about the Haitian Revolution, but Hollywood said no because there were no white heroes in it. I've been live in person at one or another conference and heard Danny say that live, and I believe it. And what he was left with a very specific form of film that he could make and participate in. All right, so let me just see. There was a couple of other, I think there were just a couple of, oh, right. I forgot. There was one other piece. So I definitely did not do the best job that could be done at this, but earlier I was trying to point out to the way that I think to my resistance historically to the weaponization of biraciality as a mechanism of denying the realities of Black life and what was not solved by the ever so inconsistent partnering across races. In other words, I never wanted to, even if I were to have had, which I didn't, the idyllic Black-white parent partnering, I would not have ever wanted it to be used as a way to suggest, as I think Reed was doing in his own way with his politics here, that there is a coming together of the races that doesn't exist. And in fact, if I were to stick anecdotally, my experience growing up was very much that it didn't. It was proof that even with lighter skin and a white parent, white America really, they believed in the one-drop rule. Maybe, again, to the point I started with, they created it to defend themselves. So they protected it. And whatever Black communities have felt about biracial people, by and large, biracial people in this country, when not performing our own versions of denial, would have to recognize that experience does more to reveal white America than anything else. And as I've often joked, though, that nobody knows white people better than Black America, and within that community, none know them better than those of us with white parents. So this idea that my biraciality could be used in some way to argue against the ravages of white supremacist settler colonial capitalism on Black communities would just be, So I've also wanted to say, like I increasingly get responses, not many, but that are critical of my presence in these politicized, racialized spaces. And other than the anecdotal point that this is just the natural progression of my life and my professional career and interests, it is also something I would encourage people to consider in terms of their own biases and the promotion of a narrative that would discourage, even if it's a tactical acceptance and recognition of biracial people as part of a Black liberatory project. In the same way, in a similar way, and I want to just quickly mention this before I get to this last piece I'm going to look at, is that, and I'm going to come back to this. I want to find a way to come back. So Sister Cherie, who works with Geechee and Dr. Shakur on Black Liberation Media, Dare to Struggle Wednesdays, had an issue, a run-in with Dr. Dennis Winkler, who I consider, a homeboy, comrade, colleague down here in Baltimore, over identity and feminism. Now, I went and watched a little bit of Dr. Winkler's presentation, saw some of Cherie's responses and some of how she was dealt with in the chat, which I don't agree with in terms of some of the way people in the comment sections dealt with her. But I think that and then Dr. Winkler hosted Davon Love on his platform the other night, and our discussion of identity was brought up, and Davon had his, so I would encourage people, I think it's already in the show description too. I think I got all the links. I'll encourage you to check that out. And what I would want to just say for now, in terms of all of that exchange, is that I think it all demonstrates the point I'm trying to get at here very quickly, which is just that whatever our preferred identity is, it has a tradition of militancy and radicalism that we all need to tap into as a bare minimum, as we appreciate whichever identity that we have. So my biraciality should never be a reason, I would think, for me to politically, philosophically, tactically, however, practically be in support of any number of varieties of Black radical traditions and Black radical politics, and any more than I would think that someone's self-definition as a feminist or a radical feminist should prevent them from doing the same. And I think this was one of the holdups there in terms of the language and the terminology that needs to be hashed out in a more full discussion in terms of how the cultural nationalist world, broadly defined, and the materialist revolutionary nationalist world all approach these topics. And I think that there was some talking past one another and some misunderstanding of the point that, as I understood Cherie to be making, don't mistake me as a white liberal because as a Black woman, I'm self-defining as a revolutionary feminist or a radical feminist. And Dr. Winkler, I feel, retreating understandably to the popular notion of feminism as a white liberal project, is saying this is a Eurocentric imposition. If I'm misrepresenting, I'm happy to continue this. And I'm saying, again, my only point is, without admittedly trying to avoid some of the unnecessary conflict, is fine. If you are saying you are an African-centered cultural nationalist of however, if you are a revolutionary feminist or feminist. What Cherie was, I understood to be doing, was demonstrating what I'm arguing for. That is tracing the more radical and militant form of that identity and leading her back appropriately to the struggle. If one wants to be an African-centered, cultural nationalist, African nationalist, find the militant, radical traditions, people, movements that do exist in those spaces, and have that be your pathway into what ultimately has to be a collective struggle. All right. Yeah, there's so much more. And forgive me, everybody. I think there's better ways that I could be approaching this. I acknowledge, I can feel it. I'm not even looking at the chat and I can feel it. But that is the point I wanted to make. Now, I will wrap here and then I'll engage. I got some time today. If you all want, I'll check the chat and we can build a little bit. But I just got sent this. So on Earn Your Liberation recently, I went and for some reason went and listened to the newly released Barack Obama, Malcolm Gladwell, speaking of multiraciality, biraciality, and the performance of these. And so please go check out those episodes of Earn Your Liberation, these last couple ones where we've talked about that. And I was just making the point that the two of them have come together to, in a quite diabolical way, recast the history of this country, to do kind of like what Reed was doing there. Yeah, it's not as racist as maybe you might think. You know, it's not as bad. We've been moving ever in some progressive, you know, and Trump is just sort of this interruption. But then the Double-O African community reached out and said, bro, I saw you was talking about Malcolm Gladwell, but did you see this? And I had not seen this. So it's already linked in the show description. It's from some years ago, 10 or more years ago now. But I just thought this was fascinating. And it's from what is apparently now defunct, but the Shame Report. And Malcolm Gladwell, who we've talked about before, has even looked apparently to want to deny his blackness. He wants to not be Halsey and have his biraciality somehow walk him away from some sort of black identity, and then the recognition apparently of how race actually works in the society, because he has chosen a very I was going to say confused path, but he may be clear about what he's doing. But as it says here, oh, wait a minute. I did it again. I put up I gotta get the one so I can get my highlighted pages on it. But Gladwell, I didn't know any of this about him. Malcolm Gladwell began, I've obviously known about who he is and all of this, but I didn't know any of it. Malcolm Gladwell began, let me put this back real quick, since we finished, although it's kind of related in this white saviorism stuff. Anyway, he began his college Malcolm Gladwell began as a college right-wing Reagan supporter, was trained by the tobacco-funded far-right Nationalism Journalism Center, and throughout his career has inserted pro-tobacco, pro-banking industry, and pro-farmer messages into his books and articles. Gladwell can earn $1 million a year as a paid corporate speaker, sometimes from the very same corporations and industry groups that he happens to promote and defend in print. So when he's doing these, do I have it here? Let's see. Didn't I? Yeah. So if I this browser thing, I'm gonna have to figure out something. But if you go, for instance, oh, it's not letting me just share that tab. Oh, it is sharing the tab. If you go here, yeah, so it is doing it. If you go to this one, you can see this is where we're talking about an all-star studded assault on race, class, and history. And then it makes more sense. This background here makes more sense. So, though I've known about him for a long time, and of course, did I say Reagan died during my wedding and we had a toast? Yeah. But I've never paid him that much attention, so I haven't read any of his books. Maybe more than a few pages, and maybe an article here or there. I don't know, but I didn't know any of this. I did not catch any of this. And this website linked in the show description is much more extensive and has a lot more that I'm going to show you on this. But if just as a quick overview, the recovered history of Malcolm Gladwell to this tobacco industry journalism training institute. He worked at the right-wing American Spectator, the Mooney-owned. Remember the Moonies? The owner of the Washington Post, not the Washington, not Post, the Washington. Oh my God! Not the Post, but its competitor, its conservative competitor. I've completely gone blank on it. So it just adds so much that he would be linked up with Obama while presenting themselves as these biracial and or black leaders of a I don't know, of a liberal America, rebranding Reconstruction and the history of this country in a way that is diabolical. Then he went on to the Mooney-owned Insight neocon Christian fundamentalist think tank called the Ethics and Public Policy Center. In 1990, he wrote in the Washington Post that laws banning cigarettes could put a serious strain on the nation's Social Security and Medicare programs. Wow, that's wild. In his book, The Tipping Point, this is, I believe, his most famous work, Gladwell blamed children for getting themselves addicted to tobacco and absolved tobacco industry advertising campaigns of guilt. However, confidential Philip Morris documents bragged Marlboro's phenomenal growth rate in the past has been attributable in large part to our high market penetration among young smokers 15 to 19. And how did they do that? Through films. Did you all see the film Thank You for Not Smoking? A confidential Philip Morris document from the mid-1990s named Malcolm Gladwell as one of the tobacco industry's top covert media assets. Now doing overt work with Obama for Obama's media production company to tell falsehoods about Reconstruction, to rebrand the country in the way he rebranded cigarettes. In 1999, Gladwell wrote a New Yorker article defending the explosion of ADHD amphetamine prescriptions to children against criticism from media and public figures. In 2004, Gladwell was forced to end a business partnership he had formed with a market research company after David Carr of the New York Times exposed the relationship and criticized Mr. Gladwell's dual career as both a marketer and a writer.
message.
Perfect for doing a rebranding on Reconstruction with the Obamas. By the way, this is all put together by Yasha Levine of Surveillance Valley fame, the great book that we've talked about on occasion here from time to time, and I continue to use occasionally in my classes. Sorry, I should have mentioned that earlier. Let's see. Gladwell took speaking fees from corporations and trade associations that he covered in print, forcing Gladwell to publicly admit that he had indeed taken money from the pharmaceutical industry. Have I gotten paid? Have I given paid speeches to companies or industries mentioned or affected by that article? Yes, I have, he said. In 2005, he was paid to speak at Philip Morris recruitment event. A highly confidential 2005 performance summary. Our efforts to develop worldwide class leaders remain a priority. I'm sorry, develop world-class leaders remain a priority. Philip Morris USA continued to enhance its leadership development efforts by introducing new sales training programs. Our mission and course toward the fact a lecture by best-selling author Malcolm Gladwell and 2 evening dinner receptions were part of the marketing strategy. In 2007, Gladwell took up the financial industry's cause. He argued that Enron's investors were to blame for their losses rather than accounting fraud, which he dismissed. His analysis was debunked and mocked by UC Berkeley economics professor Brad DeLong. So again, much like Obama's efforts around, again, look at Dr. Erica Brown's work on the history of financial literacy and Obama's role in the post-2008 Wall Street crash of promoting financial literacy, by which he was doing what Gladwell had already been doing in service of Enron and other corporate scandals, which is to blame the poor for the financial literacy of Obama. The financial literacy programs that Obama initiated were meant to put the focus back on the poor people who took those loans, who took those mortgage loans that they couldn't pay back. Not the people that offered them, or not the people that would make them pay them back or take their home. Why would that, so it's perfect that they would be working together. That same year, 2007, Gladwell hailed ex-Goldman Sachs CEO Hank Paulson's move to head the Treasury Department, praising him for being among those self-selected toward public service, ignoring the fact that Paulson saved himself $100 million in taxes. Again, perfect. In 2011, Bank of America, and who was all of Obama's economic? Where did all of Obama's economic advisors come from? Right here. 2011, Bank of America hired Malcolm Gladwell to take part in a multi-city speaking tour, a gig whose entire point is to forge a public link between a tarnished brand, the bank, and a winning one, a journalist often described in profiles as the epitome of cool, according to Columbia Journalism Review. He's the epitome of cool. Washington Post Melissa Bell wondered, Malcolm Gladwell, Bank of America's new spokesman? Gladwell is ranked as one of the highest paid speakers in America today, and this is in 2014. He pulls in $80,000 per speaking gig, or $1 million a year. And here's a partial list of his corporate clients: Philip Morris, Lehman Brothers, who of course participated and were wiped out in the collapse. Microsoft, Health Insurance, Bank of America, who were bailed out as well. Price Waterhouse. Oh, wow. So I had no idea. So this is perfect. This is who Obama teams up with. One drop is all you need. I've joked all the time So a few years ago, a black woman that I used to do radio with, both at our pirate radio spot and at WPFW, we were walking into the studio one day, and I don't know how we got there, but I must have said we, and she looked at me funny, and she, long story short, she said, oh, I didn't even know you were mixed or black. She said, I just thought you were a cool white boy. And I was like wildly offended. But my joke was that, yeah, one drop, I said, because I'm not cool. So my joke was, oh man, how did I put it? But it was, yeah, I mean, I would be a cool for a white boy, but uncool for a black man was something to that effect. But I was like, wow. So that was another one of the moments where I had to reassess the gap between my self-concept and my projected reality. But okay, I think that's it. If folks have any comments, questions, queries, conundrums, catechisms, cacophony, calumny, consternation, contemplation, condemnation, recycle them real quick, and I'll check back in the chat. I'm just going through my notes real quick, and I don't think I'm missing anything. I think I got to everything I meant to get to. Yeah, it was all right. It was. I had to. Yeah, pretty fly for a white guy, exactly. But I was like, you know. So there's a scene, I started to clip it. Do you all remember the scene in, let me see if I could pull this up real quick. I was thinking of trying to clip this and turn it into something that was reworked for my point here about, that I've been making about being mixed. Can I get away with playing this? Let me skip to, I'll just show the part where, but it's the part where Big Brother they're running the hustle to pick up the woman at the club, and Big Bro plays Little Bro, but then he's walking off with somebody's date. And that's the joke. And he says, I gotta fight every day to prove my love. So I was joking with my daughters the other day, and I was in this issue of my blackness relative, because they were reminding me that now apparently we who are mixed can't claim light skin because we're just mixed. And I thought of that, and I was making a joke with that, saying I gotta fight every day to prove my blackness. Somebody walking off. So I was going to put, like, in the scene, I was going to try to put, like, you know, when he's talking to the woman, it's like me flirting with blackness, but then she leaves with somebody else. And then I got to come back every day. I got to fight to prove my blackness. I got to fight to prove my, but really the ultimate point that I just really wanted to make was that all of these are imposed social constructs and narratives, and we need to which, however we want to find ourselves or be placed, not let the subjective experience that we endure deny us access to militant revolutionary politics and ultimately action. So, you know, if you know, I've somewhat been thinking somewhat comically, but if the public will of the Black community turns to move, in other words, if we are to lose our blackness, and I was thinking of even that speech, we who are condemned to die must go on for, you know, the point would still be, and ultimately, I've even had this argument in years ago at the pizza place. I worked delivering pizza with a mixed dude, and we had different politics on this. And his argument was the Black community has abandoned me. So because I was like, how can you be entirely in a white context? You know, white girlfriend, white friends. I was like, isn't there pain in there? Was what my point was. And he was like, but the Black community abandoned me. They don't want me around. And I didn't have the words that I don't have today even then. But my point was, what I was trying to say was, ultimately that shouldn't matter. Whatever your social, personal experiences with the Black community should not matter in terms of your analysis of race in this country, as difficult as that may be. So ultimately, you know, I've even thought of it this way: if every single Black person in the world rose up in unison and made the one sole unified act of saying, Jared, you can't be down anymore. If this was the one Pan-African solidarist act among all African people, even if that were to occur, it would still be incorrect for me to conclude any differently in terms of my political analysis. And that was really the point I was in. When I hear that argument, I'm like, how you approaching Black people that the whole community rejects you makes no sense, coming from folks who historically accepted mass as children as all. Yeah, I mean, that's also part of it. I remember that was also part of the argument. Like, it's not like every Black person is doing that to you. You've had certain experiences, and really what I was trying to say at the time was, because I remember who this person was, it's like, you're really just trying to justify your preference for white girls. And that's, I mean, if you want to just say you want a white girl, get a white girl. But if you want to make it about you preferred this white girl because the whole Black world has condemned you, that's not true. That's not true. I mean, by and large, and I remember, I don't know if I made this argument to him then, but I've always, there was only a brief period of my life where I was trying, that I would have been trying to where I would have not cared, but I've always done better with Black women, been far more accepted by Black women, diaspora wide, than I felt I was by white women. But then again, I've only really tried there, so I don't know. Maybe I didn't put in that kind of effort with white women either, so I don't know. Anyway, it's too late now. It's a wrap, you know. But I get what you're saying, Dr. Ball, but I remember in college years ago having a similar experience with someone who was Black, Jim and all the other friends, and everything else was white. Well, that's the other part of it. So that's the other part, and I'm glad you make that point. The other part of it is that we who are mixed are not the only ones out here confused and struggling with our identities and place in this world. I think this is across communities. Like, I think every community has a version of this. And OBS is really messing up today. I don't know what's going on. So you know, part of what helped me to better understand my own experience in the world was Africana studies. And in Black studies, that's the whole field of Black psychology emerges out of trying to address these traumas among, quote unquote, all Black people. So the idea that we who are mixed are somehow uniquely confused has always been absurd to me. I mean, one of my anecdotal, before, this brother I grew up with, African name, dark skin, good looking dude. We met up at the club and we were outside drunk, so drunk. And we were talking about how we thought we were doing with the women that night. And I was like, I remember, I don't know, it might be, you know. And then he said, somehow he got onto this whole thing. And I remember I had to sit down on the curb. I was so twisted. I had to sit down. And he was standing, leaning on a street lamp. And I remember looking up at him as he went into this whole thing about, I need a white girl. You know, the way her skin looks against my skin. And I was just like, wow, this is so bizarre. I was like, I think I even said to him, like, dude, you are, you are, I don't know, like a caricature of all of the trauma that you read about in books. So it's not just everybody's out here struggling. And that's why I'm also saying in terms of, and this is the issue I think we were having with not the issue, but the little, with Dr. Winkler, was that if people are identifying as LGBTQ or in some other, rather than condemning or disagreeing my whole thing is find the radical tradition, and I'll see you on the other end, like of that process, rather than saying don't accept that as your identity or part of your identity. I'm saying no, if you identify as Black or African and somewhere on the LGBTQ, spectrum, or whatever however you identify, if fine, then embrace it, study it, find the militant tradition that is there. You're gonna have to peel off all those liberal layers, I'm sure, to get to it, but it's there. And then I'll see you over on the other side when we swinging on these fools. Anyway, that's my thing. Yeah, that was some wild. It was really wild. And I know we were twisted, so he was maybe overdoing it, but it was a lot. It was like, I was just like, so I'm the mixed dude looking up at this fully Black, fully melanated character, like that would have been the thumbnail of the meme. Like, how am I the one that's confused? I'm sure at least some of it is. Look, I tend to believe that every community is basically the same. Like, there's nothing in being trans that automatically makes you a revolutionary. So I'm sure there's plenty of trans liberals and conservatives and whatevers. But sure. So, and my point would be, like, you can't, like, that can't just be the end. Like, the same way I was saying, like, saying I'm an African is not sufficient. I identify as a Black Canadian of Caribbean heritage. All right. And then that Black Canadian Caribbean community, I bet there's some revolutionaries whose stories and struggles and details I don't know. So, and then, by the way, for me, that would lead us back to revolutionary nationalism and Pan-Africanism. And that's sort of been my point. Like when old boy from Baltimore asked me that question at that public event so he could create the video and put the rainbow on me, when he asked me, do you think are LGBTQ people part of the Pan-African community? And then he held up his camera. And it's like a gotcha moment because you're in a public setting. So it's appropriate to ask you a question, but it's being done for disingenuous purposes and you're being recorded. So I gave my answer. I said, absolutely. What part of their being an African discounts them as part of the Pan-African community? And of course, there's no reaction. There's no answer. They just wait for you to finish, cut the camera off, and then go to YouTube. And then, by the way, I made a point to walk by him, and he was standing next to Dr. Leonard Jeffries at the time. And I made a point to walk past them both, look at both in the eyes, shake both their hands. And nobody said boo, because I knew what was going to happen. You're going to dap me up, look me in my face, stand right here and say nothing. And then you're going to go online and put the rainbow over me and talk about I'm captured by the queer community, the queer agenda. But you know, the point still remains. Why would you? No, the point should be, as a Pan-Africanist, fine. If you identify as lesbian, fine. Lesbian Pan-Africanist, part of the African struggle. Now get busy. Still, you know, put on the outfit, put on the blue suit. Oh man. I just don't want anybody, like, I don't want anybody to be given the excuse not to so saying that I'm a real Pan-Africanist because I'm a man, I'm a cis straight. I'm not, they wouldn't even say that. I'm a straight, you know, man, all man, you know, all right, fine. Where's the revolutionary nationalism part? To see you over there, and when you get busy. Or, so this is when the temptation is, or you could exercise all that big time tough manhood that don't talk to somebody in person and runs to YouTube to put a rainbow on them. Have you all seen my daughter show me? I'm gonna start making fun of this. I'm gonna see if I could get Geechee and Diallo to work with me on this. You ever see those I should pull them. I should find them. But anyway, I'm about to wrap up. But there's these comedic renditions of this. A couple brothers have done where they've created these videos where they're acting like they're on a podcast, but they're making fun of that manosphere stuff. And they're like, you know, kind of like, you know, where they ask those kind of questions. Would a real man put, you know, would a real man eat cereal with milk in it? Really? would a real man, so my mind would be like, would a real man really show up, ask you a question in person, shake your hand, look you in the eye and say not a word, and then run to YouTube to put a rainbow on your video? Yeah. I think those videos are hilarious. The gay choir director, they weren't that funny. That would have been funny. Oh yeah, I mean they all got murdered. Yeah. Again, that would have been my point. If you identify as white and a Jew, find a radical tradition in that, and we may, you know, see each other on the battlefield. So, real men don't eat bananas. You know what I'm saying? Do real men eat bananas? Serious question. It's kind of phallic. All right, everybody. This has been fun. Thank you all very much. I appreciate the hangout, and please do check the links in the show description for anything else. Please do leave a comment if you have any responses that you come to later, or for folks who see this later, and we'll continue the conversation for sure. If you do find interesting pieces written or have book suggestions that address in the way you think, in the way you've seen, I've been trying to this issue of multiraciality or biraciality, I'd be interested. So send me some stuff. But I hope my 2 cents on this was at least relatively clear. But if not, no harm, no foul. make many more videos, have many more discussions later. Please come back or join us on Black Liberation Media tomorrow, Saturdays with Renee, and on African World Order for Earn Your Liberation on Sunday. And then back here on Monday for the World Cup review. But I'm not going to be mad. And honestly, I'm going to encourage it, actually, that you go watch Samantha Youssef and the Imperial 80s crew and their breakdown of Roger Rabbit. And because I'll definitely see it as soon as we wrap our soccer thing, I'm going to go check it out. And if they're still going, I will jump in the live then. But so yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you very much once again. You know, I hope you had a good laugh or two. And yeah, let's end with my favorite new drop, and then we'll be out of here. All right, peace, everybody. As long as you're willing to fight for it, like Fred Hampton used to say, and I'll catch you next time here around here with more I Mix What I Like. Thanks, everybody.
And we should support Black businesses. We got to support Black. You know, my buddy Jared Ball, Dr. Ball, who is at Morgan State, talks about this myth of Black buying power. Another brother who teaches at Duke University, Sandy Darity, says, you know, we can't pool our money together and get using that, buy our way out of oppression.
Right.
This is
never buy your way out.
You can't buy your way out. We can't create enough millionaires in a capitalist society. It just can't. Nick,
And what did you sacrifice?
Calm, kindness, kinship, love. I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space. I share my dreams with ghosts. I wake up every day to an equation I wrote 15 years ago for which there's only one conclusion. I'm damned for what I do. My anger, my ego, my unwillingness to yield, my eagerness to fight, have set me on a path from which there's no escape. I yearn to be a savior against injustice without contemplating the cost, and by the time I look down, there's no longer any ground beneath my feet. What is my sacrifice? I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. Now, the ego that started this fight will never have a mirror or an audience or the light of gratitude. So what do I sacrifice? Everything.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.